Championship Wrestling, bringing you great wrestling action, sanctioned by the NWA, National Wrestling Alliance.
With a shaved head.
But I mean, like a long, long time ago, like in the 80s.
Actually, wasn't there a time, like a TNA show, where you could tell he had, in fact, cut his hair and had a back of the head wig under his do-rag?
I think it was more extensions.
I see.
That's just because, like, I mean, he was obviously a superstar Billy Graham copy.
Yeah.
And Billy Graham came back remember when he was a ninja and he shaved his head?
Yeah.
Why didn't Hulk Hogan shave his head when all his hair fell out?
It wouldn't be Hulk Hogan just totally bald.
He thought, maybe I'll just wear this bandana everywhere and it won't fall off during the match.
You want Hulk Hogan to fit in?
Yeah. Looks like a weirdo with that hairdo.
He really
looks like one of these jobbers on NWA TV.
He does look bizarre when you see hair on top of his head. Well, here we go. NWA Championship Wrestling, January 3rd, 1987. We're approaching the time where I actually started watching this company, this promotion. So the show opened with clips of a brawl between the Midnight Express and Barry Windham and Ronnie Garvin. We had the Rock and Roll Express coming out for a promo. He declared that they were the real R&R, and Raging Bull and Ravishing Rick Rude were the phony R&R. He wanted a title match, and then Ricky Morton said something about having so many women, it was like being a bullfrog on a stump.
You know, I don't know what the hell he's talking about.
No clue.
I think it's an old saying from down yonder.
I don't speak redneck, so I don't know what this meant.
By the way, that opening clip that they had of the Midnight Express versus Windham and Garvin from last week, which appeared to go to a time limit draw, I finally figured out it was airing in slow motion. Because I was watching it thinking, this Big Bubba is the goddamn worst, slowest wrestler I've ever seen in my whole life. Then I realized they slowed it down. But I honest to God didn't know it was slowed down. I thought he was just that bad.
Brad Armstrong versus Kent Glover. Kent Glover got a shocking amount of offense, and at one point he even appeared to be making a big comeback. But it was just to set up Brad cutting him off and hitting the cravat leg sweep out of nowhere for the win.
You mean the side Russian leg sweep? Is it a cravat leg sweep?
I thought he did with the cravat.
And one way or the other, Brad had a very solid professional wrestling match with professional wrestler Kent Glover.
Jim Cornette would have loved this.
He sure had him with that
wrestlers
headlock.
Came out here and wrestled in a wrestling match.
Yeah, they did. In front of wrestling fans.
They did.
On a wrestling show.
Speak of
and it was so goddamn boring.
It was not very good.
So Cornette was wrong.
Jim Cornette, speak of the devil, came out to cut a promo. He promised Big Bubba would win a lot of bunkhouse stampedes. I was watching this, all I could think was Big Bubba, in his very successful pro career, never should have stopped wearing this hat. This fedora look was awesome.
All I could think was that they were plugging more scaffold matches with the Road Warriors and Midnight Express.
That is also true.
Dennis Condrey hadn't quit yet. I was like, now I know why he did. It's coming soon.
It is.
At any moment, he just goes home and never comes back.
Takes a long hiatus.
Well, not never, yeah.
He also plugged the Crockett Cup in April. I think he's gone by then.
I'm almost positive, because I thought he was gone at the end of 86, but he stuck around a little bit in 87.
Yeah. I am positive, yes. He is gone by that Crockett Cup. So enjoy your Dennis Condrey while he lasts, everyone. Rock and Roll Express versus Alan Martin and Zane Smith.
Two hideous jobbers.
I got nothing to say about this match, but I couldn't help but note that you had one guy named Alan and another guy named Zane. This match right here was, in fact, Rock and Roll versus the A to Z Blues.
That's what you got out of this goddamn match?
What else did you get out of it?
Well, one of these jobbers looked a little bit like Jack Black. This was Alan Martin, who actually went to Continental and became somewhat of a star.
Oh, good for him.
He was a name, I'll put it that way. I don't know if I'd call him a star. And I believe he once teamed with Rip Rogers.
Wow.
This other fella here, Zane Smith, looked like a dad who had brought his child to the wrestling matches and somehow ended up in the ring in baby blue tights. He did not.
Which is not impossible.
He had probably a dozen matches. I realized this business was not for him.
He was the one who took the fall, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they when they hit the double drop kick, they laid it in. Ronnie Garvin and Barry Windham came out for a promo. First thing they did was essentially challenged the Awesome Twosome for a World Tag Team title shot, because this lays the groundwork that the World Tag Team titles are, in fact, the most important tag team titles. However, as soon as he was done with that, when he talked about all the teams they wanted to face and defend against, he made their title matches sound like the most important things in the world. It's so weird to see, after the years of the Intercontinental and U.S. titles being treated as, the guy who loses every week. These U.S. tag titles were a big deal.
That's right.
So they vowed to take care of Cornette and Bubba and the Midnights all at once, and Garvin said, I didn't win that match against Bubba at Starrcade, but I left him laying. And the other thing to take away I had here is that Barry Windham looked 8 feet tall next to Ronnie Garvin and Tony Schiavone. J.J. Dillon and Tully Blanchard came out for a promo.
Here we go.
They said they had not seen Dusty Rhodes all day. They figured Dusty was too embarrassed to show his face after promising that Tully would have lost the TV title by now, and here he was, still champion. And he said there were people in the Stampedes who clearly were not trying to win the matches, they were just trying to hurt and take out Tully. And he implied that Dusty was buying these guys off to take out his enemy for him. So they had an idea on what to do with their money, and they went to their investments and they took out a large sum of cash. And J.J. Dillon pulled out a wad that he claimed was $10,000 in cash.
He had a wad, I'm sure, of ones, and there was a $100 bill on each side.
Of course.
And a rubber band around it.
Yeah.
And he's clutching it. It's not even like it's in a briefcase.
No, it's just a stack of cash in his
He had a wad of bills in the inside
It's the
pocket.
size of like a foot-long Subway.
Yeah, of his suit jacket.
And it's in his suit jacket.
Yeah.
So they say they will offer this $10,000 cash of their own money, mind you, not the promotions, their own cash. They will offer that to anyone who is man enough to beat Tully Blanchard for this TV title.
And this is great because Tully Blanchard is very confident.
Yes.
It's not like today where you've got these heels who are cowards.
Yes.
And they're always cowards, and they're always cheating. These heels were tough guys who were great wrestlers, but if they needed to cheat, they would.
Cheating is a last resort.
Cheating...
It's on the list, but it's a last resort.
It's win if you can, lose if you must. Actually, that's not what it is.
That's what Jesse Ventura did.
That's today.
Yeah.
It is try to win, and if you absolutely must, then you can cheat.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's fair.
Now, I will admit, by the end of this, they kind of lost me. They said traditionally the TV title matches had a 20-minute time limit. They were going to make it a 25-minute time limit. Now, if it went to a draw, or excuse me, if the time limit expired, it would not go down in the books as a draw. It would go down as a win for Tully and a loss for the challenger. And then Tony says, so let me make this straight. You're going to make it long matches and shorter matches too? And JJ said, yes, we'll change the time limit as we see fit. And they left. This is all going so well, and the last 2 minutes left me confused.
Well, maybe Tony asked a question he shouldn't have asked. Who knows?
Apparently. Ron Garvin versus White Knight.
It was a black guy.
I know, that's the best part. White Knight was not even white.
He was a black guy with a white mask.
He had a white mask on like the Destroyer with the red face.
Yep.
And he was wearing leopard print tights, which were then tucked inside the biggest knee pads I ever saw, and white boots.
What a man, David Crockett said about Ron Garvin.
Ron Garvin spent about a minute playing with this fool.
I'm pretty sure at one point he cradled him and really tried to pin him, but the guy
just barely got his shoulder up.
It was so weird. It was like he was not going to let go of this cradle.
Garvin essentially had a perfect plex on him and was trying to hold him down.
Yeah.
So it went like a minute. Garvin played with him a bit. One with a knockout punch. I demand more White Knight.
He looked like a guy in his first match. Watch it turn out that he was like a great worker. Actually, I don't even know who this was.
I have no idea who White Knight was.
But he looked very, very green. He could bump.
He had a body.
I'll give him that. But that was about it.
Yeah.
And they were promoting during this match the debut of Vladimir Pietrov, the brand new Russian of Ivan Koloff. And he was, I guess, the original Big Red Machine.
That's what they called him.
Because he's a commie.
Yeah.
The Big Red Machine, the Big Red Russian.
Dick Murdoch came out for a promo.
The friendliest babyface, redneck promo.
He put over everyone. First, he stepped up to the promoter. Can't believe Jim Crockett keeps putting on these big shows all over the world. Los Angeles, Houston, St. Louis. Says everyone should go check out these shows. He promised a hoedown and a hootenanny.
Yeah, he said in Texas. We're going to Texas. There's going to be a hoedown, a hootenanny. Yep. It's like, that sounds like a lot of fun.
And he says you go to these shows, you can see all the best talent. And he put over everyone on both sides. Tully Blanchard, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Nikita Koloff, all these great wrestlers are going to go see. And then he left. That was his point.
He comes across like a guy that I could spend every day with.
I bet barbecues at Dick Murdoch's house were awesome.
I'll bet they were.
Yeah. Barry Windham versus Randy Barber. Barry Windham was a tall, young, slender, blonde man. Randy Barber was a short, old, fat, bald guy. The tall, young, slender, blonde guy beat the short, old, fat, bald guy. He slammed him around a bit and hit the lariat and won.
I had 2 words for this match. Barry wins.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got out of it.
We had the Midnight Express versus George South and Mike Jackson. This is awesome because Mike Jackson is the guy who, probably been close to a year now, but he randomly had a great match with Ric Flair on one of these shows.
That's right.
And George South is one of the better crew of the guys who never ever win on the show, but they always have good matches.
Well, you had 2 very, 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 very talented jobbers who shouldn't have been jobbers, and they had a competitive match with the Midnight Express.
And Cornette put him over.
Yeah.
He came out and said, these are talented men. Talked about the success Mike Jackson had all over the country. And I think he said Mike Jackson was the Cruiserweight champion in another promotion. But he's not a... What do they call it? Not a Cruiserweight. They call it another name for it. Junior Heavyweight.
Junior Heavyweight.
Yeah. But he's not he's not in there with Junior Heavyweights tonight. But he talked about how this was competition worthy of the Midnight Express for once. So they're having a fun match.
It's a hell of a match. This may have been the best match of the whole show.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
Well, they had the Tully match, but that was largely boring.
This was much better than that.
Yes.
I did like when Cornette talked about the Crockett Cup last year, when, of course, the Midnight Express as world champions were the 3 seed. And he's going off about what a disgrace and a debacle this was. He also called it a big hornswoggle, which is funny. So the best part of this match was Eaton catching South with a punch and South doing the tall tree timber bump for the flat back bump. And they hit a top rope knee drop and a double flapjack, which is not the coolest move, but it pinned him.
They got the win with a double flapjack.
Yeah. I think...
What?
After Eaton hit a top rope knee drop to the face.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they started doing... This time they just grabbed this guy, lifted him up, and dropped him down. They started doing it off the ropes. I think that looked cooler.
I was unimpressed with the double flapjack finish.
It was, like I say, it was not the coolest move.
Maybe that's why Condrey quit.
He didn't want to do a double flapjack
Double
anymore?
flapjack? You kidding me?
Have you seen my full Nelson Facebuster? Ric Flair came out for a promo.
This was a classic mid-'80s Ric Flair awesome promo. He did all of his spots.
Yeah.
Talked about how he was rich.
Yeah.
Famous.
All his friends are great. All the guys his friends are fighting are in big trouble.
Yeah.
He was talking about the Midnights and the Road Warriors here.
But he put over everybody.
But they're all dangerous, but his friends are more dangerous.
He put over Condrey. He put over Eaton.
Yeah.
He said these men could do moves I could never do. He put over their opponents.
What he says, they can do moves I can't even do, and I'm the best.
That's right. He reminded us at the end of putting everybody over that he's the best.
Yes.
These men are all great.
Yes.
I'm better.
Nikita, you're a great, big, strong man, but Ivan Koloff's new Russian assassin's even bigger. And then the point of all this was that leaves Dusty Rhodes, Ronnie Garvin, and Barry Windham left for him. He talked about what he was going to do to those 3 men. And finally he said, you know something, I never wear cowboy boots. I have never worn a pair of blue jeans in my life. I don't own a cowboy hat. But when I walk by, the women know that I'm the real cowboy.
He's a great man.
Crazy Flair is awesome.
Hey, there's only 8 months left of this reign before Ronnie Garvin comes in, which we've been talking about as we've been reviewing the show.
Since we started watching
for 2 years now, this chase.
The Andersons came out for a promo. Ole ran down his enemies, promised he would, quote, make his mark right in their face.
That's what he said. I don't know about that.
Arn made fun of Dusty and Nikita for representing the American dream. He vowed to end Dusty's career himself. He admitted that as a horseman without a championship belt, he felt naked sometimes. He was ashamed when he saw the goal that Tully and Rick had. And to get back to their level, he was going to take Nikita's U.S. title.
You know, I remember a year ago when Ole was there and he was talking about what he was going to do in 86. And now here it is, and he's going to make his mark in 87. I thought, man, how time has flown. We're already in 1987.
They do just roll with time, man. Tully Blanchard versus Tim Horner.
They were much more excited for 86 than they've been for 87 so far. That's all he talked about for 6 months was 86.
That is true.
And now it's just
He kept saying, this is going to be, 1986 is the year of Ole Anderson. And it's like, you're halfway done, dude. You're right where you started. So they went a long time. Been doing a lot of mat work. Barry Windham was out there doing commentary.
Let's talk about the real great thing during this match, which was J.J. Dillon is in the corner, and he's got the alleged $10,000 in the inside pocket of his sports coat. And every 30 seconds, they would cut to J.J., and he would pull out his wad of bills, and he would rifle on through them, and then he'd put them back in. Just to remind you.
Just to make sure the money was still there.
I've got $10,000 in cash right here in my jacket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the highlight of the match, everyone. Horner used what Wyndham called a pretzel hold. The other highlight was actually...
Is that like what did Granny call it? The octopus hold?
I forget how... It was funny when she screwed it up, but I forget how she screwed it up. JJ goes over to confront Wyndham. So you're just here doing... You're scouting for Dusty Rhodes. You didn't have the guts to show up today for himself. And the other thing you're out here is you're hogging the Horseman's spotlight. So they keep doing the match. It goes on for a while. And
let's talk about a bad spot. I remember when I was working with Buddy the first time, he grabbed me by the head and he was going to ram me into the top turnbuckle. And he goes, block it. So he goes to ram me into the buckle, and I extended both of my arms and I grabbed the top rope and I blocked it. He was furious.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, you think you're fucking Hulk Hogan? He goes, block it with your foot, not your arms. Use your whole leg. The point is, your leg's stronger than your arms. Yeah. And I certainly was not Hulk Hogan, so what the hell am I using my 24-inch pythons to block a buckle with? Anyway, I'm watching this match here. Tully goes to drop a knee on Tim Horner's face. And Tim Horner catches his knee with his hands. This is fucking ridiculous. Tully Blanchard's a 220-pound man, dropping all of his weight, knee first on your skull, and you're just going to grab his knee with your hands to block it? Yeah. That's fucking ridiculous.
I like when Barry Windham, who, by the way, at one point in this match, I'm pretty sure spoke for 15 minutes straight without taking a breath. He says, Tim Horner's going to make his comeback, and he's going to do it clean. He's going to do it within the rules with wrestling holds. And then a minute later, Tim Horner got the full mount and unleashed ground and pound with fists. Oops. So we had a couple near falls. People were going crazy, thinking the $10,000 and the TV title might change hands. They started frantically asking about the time limit. It was actually hysterical. JG wanted to know how much time was left. Wyndham wanted to know how much time was left, and they checked, and there was still 10 minutes to go. Because they were keeping it authentically. And then Horner hit a high cross, and Tully rolled through and hooked the tights for the win. Barry hits the ring to stooge Tully off. They get into a brawl. All the horsemen come out. Wyndham is quintuple teamed. They laid him out, and they cut a promo, and the horsemen were so happy and so proud.
I want to mention that Scrappy McGowan, the referee, took a great bump to the outside.
Yes, that's
I hope we see more from Scrappy.
So all the horsemen were happy and proud. They all had a chance to talk, and they're all bragging about what they did. And this is what you can expect when you go for $10,000, and you mess with one horseman, you mess with us all. And Arn points out, Nikita Koloff, you're the only champion on that side left.
On that side.
Pointing out there are, in fact, sides.
That's right. They're the Rudos, and they're the Technicos.
Indeed. And Flair points out nobody came out to help Wyndham because they're all scared.
And there were 5 dudes in the ring.
Yeah, because they're scared of 5 dudes.
Yeah.
Raging Bull and Ravishing Rick Rude versus Alan West and Eddie Roberts.
I was so sad this was so quick.
I was very, very sad this match went 30 seconds, but it was the best 30 seconds on the show.
Rick Rude was the master of just sack of shitting guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They did like an elevated the flying burrito. Rude held him up, and Fernandez hit the flying elbow off the ropes, and Rude just drops him.
Yeah, just let's go with the guy.
Like,
he just crashes.
The guy's laying there, and Rick Rude is the master of... It's not just the dropping the guy, although it's a part of it.
It's the disdain.
Yes, he stands over
jobbers.
them. He stands over them in just complete disdain and can't believe he has to share a ring with these fools. So he won with a DDT. They cut a promo, and they all ran down the challengers. By the way, these tag belts were awesome. I don't know how long these were around.
Oh, man, these tag belts
ruled.
And then later, I think it was Tully. Was Tully out there? He had his belt, right?
He has TV belt.
Very, very shiny gold belt. I was salivating at this thing.
Yes.
All these kids today with their goddamn pennies and nickels that they come out with. This is sickening. We need big ass solid gold belts back.
Yeah.
Not these stupid belts that are mostly air, like that stupid WWE Championship and the Universal title. It's mostly air.
It is.
It's almost all air. And then they got two other belts. Two look like pennies. Two look like dimes. And then I can't even remember the other stupid belts. I guess the Intercontinental belt's got some gold on it. The U.S. title is mostly paint. What's wrong with you?
I have a cough.
Sickening.
So while Rude's specialty was dropping dudes to the mat and standing over them with disdain, Manny Fernandez's specialty was to motor mouth through a promo for like 3 minutes and say nothing.
But he was great at it.
But it was great.
It's too bad he was so short. That's probably why he never got a WWE chance. But
he was not very tall. He did not have Rick Rude's body.
No, but he was great.
He had a great mullet. I was watching him here talk and think he would not look as cool without a mullet.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Give me a break. None of these guys look as cool without mullets. That's what's wrong with this business nowadays. Normal haircuts.
And that's part of it. Ivan Koloff came out to introduce Vladimir Petrov, the Russian assassin.
Petrov. Like Pietro's Pizza.
See, okay. Is it an umlaut, the two dots?
Sure.
There's an
umlaut.
An umlaut over the E.
An umlaut.
Which makes it Pietrov. So he's there to get revenge on Nikita Koloff. And then they just go to the ring and he's just in there. And it's Vladimir Pietrov versus the Mulkeys and Bill Tab. I can confirm he was big. He was even bigger than Big Bill Tab.
This guy was brand new in the business.
Yeah.
He was as green as can be.
Yeah.
I think he lasted maybe 3 years in the business.
I looked it up.
May have only been
for a
2.
while. Yeah.
But he was way, 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 way worse than Braun Strowman. Way worse.
Yeah. That is true. And they also did not want to expose him. So even though he was in there doing a handicap match with 3 men, he won in 15 seconds.
But it's amazing because you always hear about so-and-so got called up from developmental too early. They shouldn't have called this person up this early. These guys got called up too early. Listen, back in the day, sometimes dudes just debuted and were pushed like crazy because they needed a dude.
Yeah.
That's this Vladimir Pietrov. This guy should have been in NXT for like 5 years. But he went right up to the main roster here. And they pushed him the whole show.
Oh, yes.
Like crazy.
He was the main event of the show.
Yeah.
He didn't go on last, but he was the main event.
He was the biggest and most pushed thing on this entire
You've got
show.
to stick around to see this Russian assassin, Ivan Koloff, Scott.
I can't even think of who to compare him to nowadays. He was Braun Strowman back when he was a dancer in the Rosebuds. That's what he was here.
It was the least impressive one-man squashing 3 that I've ever seen.
And keep in mind, we had a roar spot.
There was even with a roar spot.
We had a Mulkey almost breaking his neck, going over the top rope and catching his head on the bottom rope.
Mm-hmm. And I even cut a promo on behalf of Pietrov, who is not quite as... he's a huge man, but he doesn't carry himself like a scary man. He's just a guy.
He's a big American weightlifter who they're pretending is a Russian.
Basically, yeah.
He doesn't look like a Russian.
No.
Whatever that means.
He's big. Well, he's bigger than Nikita, but if you had this guy come out and stand on one side of the screen, and Nikita come out and stand on the other side of the screen, you think Nikita's going to kill that guy.
He's got too much hair to be a stereotypical 1980s Russian heel.
His head was shaved.
No, he had hair.
Did he?
I'm almost positive.
Vladimir Pietrov.
I'm almost positive. I can go back and check.
Double check we're watching the same show. Dick Murdoch versus Henry Rutley. You noticed, it was like you noticed for the first time Dick Murdoch had a big gut.
No, it just really stuck out to me.
Maybe it's because he was working with Henry Rutley, who was very skinny fat.
Maybe he was bald. Where did I get the idea that he had hair?
Well, I don't know.
Huh. That's wacky.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Here's a picture of him with Ivan. God damn, they cut off the top of his hair. Oh, you know what? It's because he had a bandana, it looks like.
Ah, I see.
That must have been what it was. I mistook that for hair.
I see. So the fat man folded the skinny fat man in half with a suplex. Just a standard back suplex, but Rutley took this on the back of his neck and then folded it all the way over. And Murdoch rolls over and looks at him, make sure he's not dead, and looks over at the announcers like, what in the hell am I dealing with here?
Well, he was dealing with a jobber. Murdoch's gut was monstrous. Skinny legs. I mean, he always looked like this.
Yeah.
There was
he
no
looked
change.
like Dick Murdoch.
It just really... Maybe it was because I just seen Vladimir Pietrov.
That's possible, too.
And now comes Dick Murdoch looking like this. His hair was also very yellow.
Yeah, overly bleached.
He washed the bleach out too early.
Ah, I see.
Didn't have time to fully set. That's what happened here.
So he has some fun with the guy for a bit, and he goes to hit the Brainbuster to win, and he always did the delayed Brainbuster anyway. So he hooks him for the suplex, and he holds him up, and he's holding him up there upside down. And what's the guy's name? Henry Rutley. Rutley's free arm is just hanging loose. Just put down to the mat, obviously. And halfway through, he realizes, I should do something with my arm. And so he holds it straight up. He holds it up by his waist, just holding it there. And Murdoch holds him up and holds him and holds him, and he's skinny fat, so he can hold him a long time. And then he just sits down and drops him with the hysterical Brainbuster.
He held him up for a long time. It was very physically impressive. I mean, he didn't move one muscle. He was just a stone holding him up there. Didn't shake, nothing.
Nikita Koloff came out for a promo.
This was the shiny golden championship belt I was speaking of.
The U.S. title.
Very, very shiny and very golden and very polished. Very reflective.
So if you've never heard a Nikita Koloff promo, his style was to mumble and speak in a gravelly voice. And his other thing was he would say all his sentences just came out as one giant long word. I have a lot of things I want to talk about today. He ran down. That was a terrible impression. He said...
Better than most of your impressions, I'll give you that much.
Fair enough. He said he was very familiar with Vladimir Petrov, and Vladimir Petrov indeed was a fine Russian athlete.
First off, I can't believe you're glossing over his T-shirt. Nikita had a white T-shirt on. I believe that he had grabbed a Sharpie and drawn 2 stick figures on the front of his white shirt. I am not making this up. This is exactly what it looked like. It was the most... Now, remember we used to make fun of Ole for those shirts that he clearly had made at the mall?
Yeah.
That was going above and beyond compared to this shit. A white shirt with stick figures drawn in with a Sharpie.
I think it was supposed to be a self-portrait.
Clearly!
It was not very good. Maybe drawn while he was wearing it. So he knew Petrov better than Petrov knew himself, and he mumbled in his low, gravelly voice for a long time, and it really sucked. Andersons versus Larry, Steven, and David Isley. He beat these fools up for a few minutes and won with a gourd buster. Nikita Koloff versus Chance McQuaid.
I was so excited when I saw Chance McQuaid.
This is a fantastic name.
But then there was nothing to it. Chance McQuaid was the worst Magnum TA you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. It was like just some fan who decided, I'm going to cut my hair and mustache like Magnum. I'm going to go as him for Halloween. And then he wandered his way into this building and Nikita Koloff killed him.
Nikita won in 20 seconds with the sickle. The Road Warriors came out for a promo. Called out the Awesome Twosome. Called out Vladimir Pietrov. The Midnight Express. Talked about the scaffold matches. Running down every heel in the world. And somewhere in here, Hawk said Ric Flair had a body like Humpty Dumpty after he fell.
I don't know if that's what he said.
Something along those lines.
Yeah, something about, he made a comparison to Humpty Dumpty after he fell, and then mentioned that, like, it's all over the place. I don't know what he was referring to.
I don't either.
He was trying to be a stand-up comedian, and he failed worse than Dolph Ziggler has ever failed.
Yes. And finally, Paul Ellering says, "Come on, boys, we're going Amarillo."
No, Precious.
They called him Precious here.
They said, "Tell him, Precious."
Yeah.
And I thought, first off, where is Precious? Number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, why is Paul Ellering Precious?
They called him Precious Paul sometimes.
I know, but why? That's my question. I know he's Precious Paul, but why was he precious?
Well, they can't replace him.
Because he was a power lifter that beat your ass?
Apparently.
What's precious about that?
There's only one Paul Ellering. If they lost him, there's no replacing him, therefore he was precious to them. So, but the key is, his last words, because they have a tour coming up, obviously. His last words are, "Let's go to Amarillo." They go away, they fade to break for the commercial, and they come back, and the Road Warriors come out. And I don't know if they had been to Amarillo and back, or if Paul forgot.
They were on their way.
Or if Paul forgot they had a match.
On the way out, they faced Dave Spearman and Clement Fields.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is my favorite name in wrestling history.
Clement Fields is pretty great.
Clement Fields. Yeah. And they killed him and then went to Amarillo. They
did not even want to do the Doomsday Device, so Hawk just hit Animal hit an atomic drop, and Hawk hit the lariat, and that was that. They went to Amarillo. At this point, they were out of things to show, and they still had some TV time left. So, they re-aired the debut of Vladimir Pietrov.
I couldn't believe it, because they said...
The whole thing.
It said, "Let's take you back and show you the debut of Vladimir Pietrov." And I thought, man, we didn't watch last week's show. Must have been a hell of a debut for him to want to show it again here this week. And I'm watching it, and I thought, is that the Mulkeys? Is that Big Bill Tab? And I realized, it's the same goddamn match I saw an hour ago.
Yeah.
They put up a recorded earlier. They show it again.
Legit.
To let same goddamn match.
Yeah.
I learned nothing new.
No.
I didn't notice more this time. I noticed the Mulkey nearly killing himself. Mm-hmm. Other than that, wow, cool.
I noticed the roar spot more the second time. And then the announcers talked about Tully's $10,000 challenge. And they said, "Folks, we want to let you know Barry Windham is okay," after he had to be helped to the back. And then they said goodbye.
Yeah. It's so funny because nowadays there always has to be something bad happening to the baby faces. Like there's a heel GM and there's diabolical heels, and the heels kill Sami Zayn. Nobody knows where Sami Zayn is. He's been missing for 3 weeks. Mick Foley's dead, this or that. Whatever your wacky storyline is with the baby faces. Here, they wanted you, the viewer, to know, we don't want to ruin your weekend. So just so you know, even though Barry Windham was attacked by 5 men, he's okay. Now go enjoy your Saturday night. We'll see you next time. That's how they ended.
Exactly.
It's like, God, no wonder people loved watching this show.
It's fun.
It's a feel-good, fun show. Even when bad things happen, it ain't that bad. You can still enjoy your day.
That's right.
That's how the show went off the air. I enjoyed the show. Not the best show, but I enjoyed it. And that's it, everybody.
So let's get funky like a monkey.
Greatest thing I've ever seen. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about this NWA World Championship Wrestling show from 30 years ago this week. Let me add, by the way, if you've not seen the Magnum TA documentary, I Never Quit, there's a man almost as manly as Minoru Suzuki.
That's true.
Maybe more manly, given what he's gone through.
Yeah.
But at the time, when he was an active wrestler, he was not quite as manly as Minoru Suzuki.
Different kind of manliness.
But he was pretty close. Yeah. It is a fabulous documentary. I highly recommend it. And if you've not heard the interview with Magnum TA, I highly recommend that as well. All up on the front page of WrestlingObserver.com. Sadly, he's not on the show, but apparently on next week's show, they announced that he's going to be showing up for an interview soon. I was unaware of that.
I see.
He did come back for an interview at some point, I believe. All right, let's get going.
January 10th, 1987, NWA Championship Wrestling. The show opens, and Tony Schiavone's standing there, and he says, "Welcome, fans. Here's what we got on tap for today." And standing to his right is Ricky Morton, and it's winter. She's got a big poofy jacket with a fur collar. And over on the other side is Robert Gibson, who also has a big poofy jacket. And he looks sad and depressed. And thinking to myself, you know what he looks like there? And this is a reference you won't get, Brian. But he looks like Andrew Ridgely.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Ridgely.
You don't know who he is.
I have no idea.
Andrew Ridgely was the other guy in Wham!
Oh, yeah.
And it occurs to me, this is a very
I don't know who the other guy in Wham was.
His name was George Michael.
Oh, George Michael.
He did very well for himself. And it occurred to me what an apt comparison this is. Robert Gibson was the Andrew Ridgely of the Rock and Roll Express, and Ricky Morton was George Michael. Anyway, they ran down all the usual tag teams and stuff. Jimmy Garvin versus Keith Vincent. Like most Garvin squashes, boring.
You know, the thing was with Garvin, so Magnum used to always come out and do the belly-to-belly and it was over.
Right.
And it was explained that the Crockett's wanted people to pay to see Magnum wrestle. So he only very, very, very briefly appeared on television. If you wanted to see a long Magnum match, you had to go to the arenas. You had to buy your ticket. Clearly, they didn't feel that way about Jimmy Garvin.
No.
This guy's squash matches were always so long. They just went on and on and on and on and on. I guess that was a way to get heat. Because by the time this ended, I was sick of this guy. I wanted someone to come in and beat his ass. He was in here with Keith Vincent for 15 minutes.
Yeah, and Vincent wasn't very good either. He didn't sell much of anything. Garvin won with the brainbuster.
This Vincent was a low-rent Manny Fernandez, but he actually had a better body than Manny Fernandez.
He had a much better body than Manny Fernandez.
Yeah. He was one of those guys who I thought, this man maybe could be something, somewhere, someday. Probably Central States, given who the new champion is.
I found something here. This is from the Woodinville Weekly, an article published January 11th, 2016, almost exactly 1 year ago. McMenamin's pool closed due to visibility issues from fog.
Wow, how about that? I wonder where that fog came from.
Fogginess in the pool. It was obstructing the vision of the lifeguards. They had to close it until they found a better ventilation system.
So this was their plan, just cut a hole in the roof?
Well, no, they had the holes then. They found some other way to get air going through so it's not quite as foggy, apparently. They were working with the health department to let's see, the pool manager at McMenamin's, Deborah Shelton. We're working with the health department to deal with the fog that sets up in our pool area, which does cause some visibility concerns. It's a problem that affects most pools in the winter. The McMenamin's pool was designed to have open-air skylights, which allows cold air to enter, Shelton said, but we didn't foresee this much fog in the pool room.
Really?
There's no other comment on the skylights.
Huh, yeah. Well, now you know.
All right.
I wasn't making this up.
No.
People think I'm exaggerating. There was at least visibility when I was there today.
The health department shut down the pool.
They didn't shut it down today.
No. Bill Dundee came out here on this wrestling show to cut a promo celebrating his new Central States Championship.
A beautiful, golden, shiny belt. God, it was pretty.
It was awesome, because the first thing he did was... So much of the guys on these shows, especially the guys like Dundee who are coming in from outside, they're trying to get themselves over by picking a fight with a big star. Like Bill Dundee, the other guy, Buddy Landell. He would come out and pick a fight with Ric Flair, and Flair would just ignore him. Dundee's doing the same thing here. He's trying to bait Dusty Rhodes into a fight. Trying to get him to say something or get involved with them all.
Clearly, he was not following this business very closely.
No.
That's the last guy I'd want to challenge to a fight.
Yeah. And he's trying to get into a match, and then he says, once I'm done with Rhodes, I'll take on my Central States challengers, like Doug Peterson.
Yeah.
And he says his name, and he realizes no one on the TV knows who Doug Peterson is. He's a big star in the Central States area. An Italian stallion. These are the men he's actually going to be wrestling in the coming months. Schiavone interviewed Jim Cornette and his crew. There was a dispute, apparently, among who had won the Bunkhouse Stampede series.
Yeah, I told you about this.
Okay.
So, Big Bubba is the Bunkhouse Stampede champion, Cornette says.
Right.
And Tony Schiavone says, well, you and Dusty are in a virtual tie. And I thought, what is a virtual tie? Is it a tie or is it not a tie? A virtual tie sounds like Bubba is winning right now.
I know what it means in most sports, but that involves a combination of wins and losses. But there's no, unless they actually penalize Dusty for losing a battle royal. Which I don't think they did.
Well, the way that was explained, somehow they have the same number of wins in the Bunkhouse Stampede.
Yes.
But based on you won a certain amount of money for each win, Bubba is actually $75,000 richer in Stampede money than Dusty.
One of them had a much larger jackpot than the others, and Bubba had won that one. Therefore, the only reason you fight in these is to make money. Bubba won the most money, therefore he should be the winner. So,
he adds it. He wants the boot.
There's a boot and a big pile of money.
There is a bronze boot that you get if you win. I was like, man. So, you know what I need in this house is a bronze boot cluttering everything up. What the hell are you going to do with that thing?
There's always room for more trophies in Casa de Cornette. So Jim Crockett arrived, and he had a resolution to this problem, to this dispute. He says, I have a match signed in February in Pittsburgh. I have a contract here for you to sign. It is a one-on-one match between Big Bubba and Dusty Rhodes inside a steel cage, and you win by throwing the other guy out.
Yes, you have to throw your 300-plus pound opponent over the top of the cage, or through the door, or apparently through the cage.
As Dusty would get into later.
Yeah.
This sounds like the worst match of all time.
You know, it really does.
Cornette was fine with this.
Well, Jim Crockett adds that I have the check and the boot. That's all he had to say. Now Cornette was ready to sign.
Cornette was eager to sign because even though he would rather just have, Bubba just get the check right now, he wanted the check and the boot right now, he would delay that for the opportunity to have Bubba put Dusty out of wrestling once and for all. So he signed, the match was done.
Now, he did want interest.
That's true.
Yeah.
He was sure to say it's a $100,000 payout. A lot of interest will accumulate between now and February when the match takes place.
Yeah, that's a lot of interest in 1 month.
Maybe he's got a really great mutual fund. Brad Armstrong versus Tommy Angel.
You ever seen those matches where... I mean, these men could be twins.
That is what I wrote down.
Yep.
Angel looked like Brad Armstrong.
Brad's mullet was a little more voluptuous.
He had a little bit more curl, but it was two muscular white dudes wearing trunks and boots.
He was a little leaner, and he had a little bit of a light beard.
There was a beard, that's true. But they both had curly, dirty blonde mullets.
It was a virtual tie, to steal a phrase.
It really was. So Brad Armstrong, I believe we've been watching for a while now. I think it's fair to say he was the best wrestler who did the worst squashes.
He did a lot of hold trading.
There was headlocks. There was arm bars. There was terrible chain wrestling because Tommy Angel couldn't keep up. We had a hip toss for a near fall.
Can you imagine not keeping up with Brad Armstrong in this match? All you had to do was lay there in a headlock for 10 minutes.
And let me repeat this. A hip toss for a near fall. More headlocks, more arm bars. Tony Schiavone was so bored. He talked about the Russians. He had a long spiel about Nikita Koloff and Vladimir Pietrov and how they would meet in the ring someday. Eventually, Armstrong won with a leg sweep.
Yahoo. So anyway, at the end of this match, they go to commercial. And whenever they go to commercial, there is a graphic.
Yes.
And it says something
I'm so
like,
happy you wrote this down.
The best wrestling in the world is right here. Stuff like that. I swear to God, in all of the years that we've been watching this show, and it's going on probably 3 years now, it's been a while, at least 2 years. This is what was written on the bottom of the screen as they went to commercial break. Feeling tense? Relax with wrestling right here. That's how they went to break.
Like it's a spa.
Yeah. I was like, I was feeling tense, but I don't feel any less tense after that Brad Armstrong-Tommy Angel match.
Well, Ronnie Garvin and Barry Windham came out for a promo. I'm not entirely sure what Garvin's point was, but I believe he said all the heels were scared.
What he said was all of the horsemen are cowards because they're always interfering or something. And he goes, that's going to change. I was like, how is it going to change if the horsemen are cowards? You get extra guys, they're still cowards, right?
I guess
What are you
so.
talking about, Ronnie?
I don't know. So Wyndham says, yes, I stuck my nose in the Horsemen's business last week, but they tried to take me out of wrestling forever, and that's going too far. Bill Dundee versus Randy Barber.
I was trying to figure out who looked worse in this match.
I have never seen a shorter, skinny, fatter match in my life.
Barber sort of looked like Festus, back when he was Festus, just fatter and whiter and had even worse hair.
Paler.
And Dundee, he just is so short, and he just hikes his... You know, Barry Windham, in his promo just before this match, was talking about a match last week with... It was Tully and who was his...
Tim Horner.
Tim Horner.
A very forgettable man.
It was very forgettable. But the point is, Barry said that Tully won when he pulled Tim Horner's trunks all the way up to his neck.
Yes.
Well, it's funny because this match, I'm pretty sure that Dundee's shorts were pulled all the way up to his neck. Now, although I'm making fun of Bill Dundee at this point in his career had been in this business for 25 years in 1987. It is now 2017. He is still actively involved in this business. He wrestled as recently as a year ago.
All right.
He has been an active wrestler going on 55 years.
Impressive.
I'm 41.
Yeah.
He's been in this business 14 years longer than I've been alive.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
He has some staying power.
He sure does. And you know what? I saw a picture of him from last year. I'm pretty sure he looked exactly the same. Like, identical.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I can believe that. So this started out as a very bad wrestling match. Then it turned into the worst boxing match of all time. I can't even describe the jabs and feints that were being attempted here. An atrocity in to the art of boxing. Eventually, Dundee won with a top rope knee drop. Cornette returned. Second promo of the show. He plugged still more scaffold matches. He repeated his claim that Big Bubba should have won the Stampede Championship, the Bunkhouse Stampede Championship, and he left. And went to break. They came back. Dusty Rhodes came out for a promo.
Both these guys just promoting this cage match that's coming up.
Yep. The Bubba Dusty cage match. He's out here in a Mick Foley classic red plaid flannel. And he's beginning to explain how he is going to take Bubba Rogers and push him through the cage.
Yeah.
And then he would get stuck. This was his plan.
Well, that's a bad plan.
You can't get him out if he's stuck. So he hyped up the cage match, hyped up Nikita Koloff's title defenses, hyped up Ric Flair's title defenses, said hello to his babies in North Carolina. Yes, that means Cody. Nikita Koloff versus Larry Stevens.
God. So we've now seen 2 Vladimir Pietrov matches. We saw one last week. We see one later on here in this show. Then they cart out Nikita. It's like, my God, this guy's like Undertaker in his prime compared to this.
That's actually a good comparison.
Vladimir Pietrov. He's running. He's flying.
Here especially.
He looked fucking amazing.
I mean, he's always intense. He's always on his on his game. But he came out here and ran through this guy like a freight train, and he pinned him with a sickle in 20 seconds.
By the way, if you watch the Magnum documentary, there's a lot of Nikita in it. And it's funny because he's talking in his real voice.
Is it the Nikita of 2016?
Yeah.
Okay.
But he looks very much like the Nikita.
Sure.
I mean, he has shaved head.
Yeah.
It's not like he lost his hair.
Right.
He looks roughly the same. But he's talking in his normal voice, which he actually sounds like he could be a drive time host on a Nashville radio station.
Okay.
But then there is one point where he goes into the voice again because he's doing a recreation of one of his promos, and he can still do it.
I'm sure he can.
It's great.
It's like riding a bike. Tully Blanchard versus Alan Martin in a TV title championship match.
I got to say, before I looked at the screen, I heard Tony Schiavone say that this man, Alan Martin, has a chance to win a championship here on national TV. I heard those words. Then I looked at the screen. This man is not winning anything on national television. He is not winning a wrestling match. He is not winning a bodybuilding contest. He is not winning a powerlifting contest. He's not winning a Bosley endorsement. There's nothing this man is winning. He was hideous. I mean that in the most respectful way possible.
Tully beat him up for a while, and then he actually gave this guy the big gradual no-sell Hulk Hogan comeback, but he did it just so he could cut him off with complete disdain and win with these slingshot suplex.
Now, that's not entirely accurate. What happened was, Tully lets the guy punch him a couple of times, and he just stands there and doesn't sell anything. To the point where you're thinking, he's exposing the business right now. This man is punching him right in the face, and he's not even flinching. But he let the guy punch him about 10 times, and by the 10th time, he was selling. Because I guess the story was, in real life, Tully let him have a few shots, but the guy hit harder than Tully expected.
He paid for it.
Then Tully kneed him, hit his finish, and won. I enjoyed this match. And no, Alan Martin did not win the championship here on national television.
Not this time.
Yeah, maybe next time.
There may be another shot down the road.
There's not.
Ric Flair came out for a promo.
Don't want to kill this show for everybody. Do not expect Alan Martin to be beating Tully for the title.
It's a parallel chase. As Ronnie Garvin's getting his cage match in November, Alan Martin is chasing Tully Blanchard.
Yes.
Ric Flair came out for a promo. He talked about how great the Horsemen were. He showed off his suits. He said the Horsemen drew fans to the buildings because they're champions. Showed off his belt. They showed some pretty ladies in the crowd. And he left.
Now, granted, Hulk Hogan in the 80s made a lot more money than Ric Flair did. But Hulk Hogan, before all of his trials, tribulations, divorces, etc., had a net worth of like $30 million.
Sure.
Ric Flair did not.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching this, and I don't want to belittle anybody or make fun of anybody, but have you seen the lineup for the WWE UK tournament? And they're all standing there next to Hunter, and they're all in suits.
Sure.
And you see a lot of these guys coming out in suits nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, listen, I don't buy $5,000 suits either, because I want to have a net worth of $30 million. I don't want to end up like Ric Flair. But you see a lot of these guys coming out in suits, and it's like, that was a $50 suit that he got at Value Village. Or maybe a big special at JCPenney's. You see Ric Flair out here? That man spent a shit ton of money on everything he wore.
Mm-hmm.
You can see on television in 1987 how expensive all that shit was. Like, it's not cheap. This fucking guy went out and paid thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and spent money like he was going out of style to be Ric Flair. Now listen, I don't recommend this. Go buy your suit at Value Village and JCPenney's. I'm just pointing out that this guy didn't do it, and it was abundantly obvious watching it on television.
I believe he said Michaels in Kansas City was his tailor of choice.
That guy's probably got a net worth of $30 million.
I bet he
because
does.
of Flair.
I bet he does. He basically has all of Flair's money. Tully Blanchard came out for a promo. He talked about how great the Horsemen were. Ran down Dusty Rhodes, who was getting a TV title shot that night in Philadelphia. He talked about beating up Tim Horner last week and then beating up Barry Windham, how they left him begging for mercy, and then they cut him off almost mid-sentence.
You know, I was talking to my
show
buddy
is not live.
Dave Gray about Tully Blanchard. He was a big fan. He watched this. He would go home every Saturday afternoon and watch this, and huge fan of Tully. And I'm a huge fan of Tully. And we were talking about how awesome Tully was. And it's really abundantly obvious that this guy was so unbelievably great, but he had to follow Ric Flair.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if there was no Ric Flair, Tully may be like an all-time legend. But he was stuck there, having to follow Ric Flair out there being Ric Flair. That's a tough act to follow.
It is.
That's the definition of a tough act to follow.
Mm-hmm. Rock and Roll Express versus Alan West and Eddie Roberts. Alan West was a big muscular dude who looked like the mean jock in every terrible 1980s teen movie.
I thought that was Eddie Roberts. I'm sure I'm wrong.
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
There was one guy that had a good physique and wasn't a bad worker.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I didn't have a watch out, but I believe this match was longer than Kazuchika Okada and Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom. They went forever. They did nothing. They went through a break. They came back and did more nothing. They actually got the heat on Ricky Morton for like a minute just so he could get a hot tag and win with a double dropkick. And they get the win. And Tony Schiavone says, "That was a very good match." Liar. You are a liar, Tony Schiavone. Schiavone interviewed Dick Murdoch. I am pretty sure he was drunk here. He talked about how great everyone was. He said he had a party. And he had a party, a hootenanny.
He had a hootenanny, not a party.
And the kids liked the Road Warriors, and they liked Dusty, and they liked Nikita. And it like seconds passed, I realized I thought he was literally talking about a party at his house. Until I realized he meant a wrestling show had been put on.
Well, it was weird. He was talking about a hootenanny, and he said all the kids liked Dusty, Nikita, etc. But he had this wry smile on his face, as if there were no children at this hootenanny. And this was not the kind of hootenanny you were all thinking. It was a wild hootenanny.
I don't know. So he says all these shows are so great that Jim Crockett puts on all over the country. Tully Blanchard's such a great TV champion. Ric Flair's a great world champion. Rude and Fernandez are great tag team champions, but all of us want to be the world champion. Then he was done.
Yeah.
Don't ask me.
You know, this is not a revelation, but it did hit me during this show. And this is not shocking, and I don't even know why I'm mentioning it, but I like the interviews on this show a lot better than the matches.
Now, do you mean this episode or
most of these shows?
Almost all of them. Almost without fail. Like
virtually every interview I look forward to.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of matches where I just look at the screen and I'm like,
whatever.
Oh, man.
Yeah. No,
Alan Martin.
I've given up on this a long time ago. It's funny because like the second or third show we watched, they did Ole and Magnum. I think it was Flair and Ronnie Garvin. And they were both unbelievably awesome. And there's not been a good match since, I don't think. Like Flair and Mike Jackson may have been the best since then. So now it's time.
Take that back. We had the Road Warriors against two geeks.
No, I identified these men.
Really?
This is important. Now, perhaps I got the names wrong again, but I got their names. This was for sure the in-ring highlight of the show. The Road Warriors versus Ray Aaron and David Isley.
Now, before you talk about what happened, let me explain what they looked like. At least one of them.
Okay.
One of these guys, I'm not sure which one it was. He was the guy that really sucked. He was the guy that paid the price, as Ric Flair would say.
Mm-hmm.
He was so white that he was blue.
Haven't heard that one in a long time.
And he's wearing white knee pads in a blue singlet.
Yeah.
So I could at least say, okay, he's more white than he's blue. Because I could tell where his skin ended and his singlet began, but I couldn't really tell where his legs ended and his knee pads began.
I see.
That's how white this guy was.
Yeah. The other guy, I'm pretty sure the other guy, he was like Bill Dundee and Farmer or whoever he wrestled. He was also skinny fat.
Farmer?
Who did Bill Dundee wrestle on the show? He was
Randy Barber.
Barber.
Not Farmer.
Sounds the same.
No, it doesn't.
Rhymes. Listen, the point is, he was skinny fat, and he was going to be a wrestler. And he went to, I guess, the wrestler gear store. He said, what should I wear? I'm going to get a singlet. But I'm not going to get a full body singlet. I'm going to get the one like Scott Norton wears, where the neck is cut all the way down to his belly, so it shows off his massive chest. I'm going to get that singlet. But this isn't Scott Norton. He got a singlet designed to display and feature his flabby pecs. This is a poor decision. So they're doing this match, and there's not that much to it. And the Road Warriors are hitting clotheslines and shoulder blocks and press slams. And then Hawk whips in Isley. I'm pretty sure it was Isley.
This is the guy.
This is the guy.
Yeah, this is the really pale guy.
Oh, yeah. And he whips in Isley, and he goes to throw a drop kick. And Isley panics and throws on the brakes. He drops down. There is no contact made. He leaves Hawk out to dry. Now they both look like complete idiots. And Hawk gets up. This isn't Ken Shamrock. This isn't even Rick Rude. But it's a really, really pissed off 300-pound bodybuilder.
Now keep in mind, Hawk was not the world's best wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure he fucked up his fair share of spots. You can only imagine what must have happened to make this man lose his shit in the middle of a wrestling ring.
Oh, yeah. So he grabs Isley and picks him up by the head, and he palms him by the back of the head. And he throws this head like a baseball into the middle turnbuckle. He's in the middle of the ring and just throws him, and Isley goes headfirst into this turnbuckle. So Hawk's got his seat. He's still pissed, but he's calmed down a little bit. He tags an Animal. Animal does some stuff. Animal tags Hawk back in. Hawk goes for a gut-wrench suplex. Now, I don't know if too many guys are doing this move these days. It's kind of faded away. But all you do is grab him by the waist and flip him over. It's not complicated. But Isley cannot take it.
This guy could not go up for anything.
He may, and now that I think about this, he may have actively been fighting this suplex. Because as Hawk is trying to twist him over, the dude's arm is like wrapped around Hawk's waist, and he's screaming. And I mean screaming. So Hawk's standing there with him upside down. He can't get the guy over, and he can't get the guy over, and he can't get the guy over. And finally he says, Jesus Christ. And he just like herks him up onto his shoulder and drops down to his knees. So the guy's back falls across his shoulder, and he drops down. And Hawk stares at him, and stares at him, and stares at him. And he grabs him around the waist and gives him a gut-wrench suplex. He just lifted him as hard as he could, and he threw him down as hard as he could. And then he tagged an Animal. They did not hit the Doomsday device. The Animal went to the top rope. Hawk handed him Isley, and Animal hit a top rope
Yeah,
power
he
slam.
fucking tried to, but Isley couldn't even go up for that.
Yeah.
He lifted him up like you're going to lift a guy up for a vertical suplex, and this fucking guy would not go up. And Hawk hurks and finally gets him up.
Let's think about this. Think about this. Hawk!
Lucky. Yeah.
Hawk had to work at getting this guy up.
Yeah, this guy's lucky
Road
to be
Warrior
alive
Hawk.
today.
Animal with the power slam. And the Road Warriors cut a promo. I'll be honest, I spent the entire time they were talking, recapping all that had happened in the match.
Well, Hawk was absolutely furious. And usually he stands there and he does a bunch of stupid, goofy one-liners and it sucks. Not this time. He's talking about these cowards and these losers. I could have sworn he called everybody sluts.
Slugs.
He may have called them slugs, yeah. But it sounded like he called everybody a slut. And then he made sure he got in his one quip there at the very end. You look like your neck threw up.
Yeah,
that was his funny line this time. This was amazing.
So they're talking more. The last thing, the Road Warriors leave, and Ellering always has to get the last word. And
Oh, this guy.
I don't even, what did he say?
All I know is he was wearing a tan leather jacket, wraparound sunglasses, a tan cowboy-style hat, and a purple shirt.
Yeah. I was too busy writing about the match to write down what he said, what his last line was, but I believe he said, "Why would you want to walk around dead when you can get a funeral for $22?"
I don't know what the hell that was about.
Well, we'll bring it up later. Barry Windham and Ron Garvin versus the Mulkeys.
You know, at the beginning of this show, they announced this match was going to take place, and I was so excited. I thought, man, I'm going to get to see Ron Garvin and Barry Windham put a beating on these Mulkeys. Problem is, the Mulkeys were apparently way too respected.
Yeah.
And so these men just had a match with them.
The closest they came, because Ronnie Garvin, because everything he had to do, he had to hurt the other guy no matter what. He's got him in a face lock down on the mat, and suddenly he just starts slapping the guy in the back. For no reason. Just like 5 or 6 super hard slaps.
Hey, my favorite was...
Let me cut you off, because I know what your favorite was, but I want to talk about what set it up.
All right.
Because Ronnie Garvin picked this guy up. In the very next match, by the way, or the very first match after the Road Warriors match, he goes for a gut-wrench suplex, and the same thing happens. The Mulkey's arm's in the way, and Garvin can't hit the suplex. This move is not complicated. I've seen it 1,000,000 times. I've never seen it fucked up before once in my life. Here it is in back-to-back matches. So Garvin's pissed, and what does he do, Brian?
Well, I don't think he did this because he was pissed. Maybe he did. You've all seen a backslide. Men go back-to-back, they interlace their arms, and they struggle to see which guy can drop to his knees and pull the guy over so his shoulders are on the mat for a near fall, or a pinfall if he can get it. Ronnie Garvin did a power backslide.
A snap backslide.
They went back-to-back, and there was no struggle. I think the storyline in Garvin's mind was, why would I ever struggle doing this match against a Mulkey? Of course I'm going to win. It's like a flash win in arm wrestling.
Sure.
He hooked him up, he interlaced the arms, and he fucking dropped to his knees and head so hard that this guy was powerbombed onto his shoulders in a backslide.
It was essentially a razor's edge.
This was the greatest backslide I've ever seen in all of the years I've watched wrestling.
He did not lift him up, but they stood back to back, and he grabbed the guy's arms, and he paused for a second, and the next thing you know, he's leaning forward, the Mulkey is flying backwards, and his head lands on the mat. This was awesome. And then Barry got the win with the lariat shortly thereafter.
I was watching this match, and I was thinking about the Magnum interview and documentary, and he talks about all of the difficulties he had breaking into the business. He's like a good-looking guy. He had an amateur background, he had a good physique, and he went to a tryout, and it was patently obvious that no one in this tryout was going to get into this business. It was all about the wrestlers beating the shit out of them.
And taking their money.
So they'd go tell their buddies how tough wrestling was and how tough the wrestlers were.
Yes.
He walked out. Oh. Yeah. Anyway, I was thinking about that, and then I was thinking about the Mulkeys and the two geeks in the Road Warrior match, and Alan West and Eddie Roberts, and all of these guys that got into the business. How?
That's actually a great question.
How did these people get into professional wrestling? It was so hard to get in back then, and these guys got in.
Clearly, they knew somebody.
Yeah.
No one walked in off the street and said, Alan West did not walk in off the street and say, I would like to wrestle today. And they said, did you bring your boots? No, that didn't happen. Ivan Koloff came out for a promo. He says Nikita is hiding from Vladimir Pietrov, and I do not blame Nikita for this.
Oh, my God.
So we go to clips of Pietrov. He's doing a squash match with Tony Zane when Ivan attacks the ref, they throw him out of the ring, and Ivan holds Zayn so Petrov can hit what I thought was a diving lariat, which they actually showed in slow motion.
It's a diving neck grab. It's a diving neck hold.
It is. It is.
That's what it is.
They call it the Russian hammer, because the sickle is the clothesline. The Russian hammer is, you can do it diving or to a guy running at you, but it's essentially a choke slam where you don't lift the guy. You just grab him by the neck and slam him down to the mat. So this is what Pietrov was trying to do here. It looked very, very bad, but there's more.
Dude, before they show this footage, they said that Tony Zane had been hospitalized after this match.
Actually, that's a good point.
With a serious neck injury.
I haven't explained they had to take him to the hospital. His neck had been injured so badly.
That's right. And I thought, you know what? This Pietrov, he's green as grass. He just broke into this business. God, he probably really hurt Tony Zane. Then I watched it, and it was the phoniest thing I ever saw. Until the next match.
Which featured Vladimir Pietrov. Vladimir Pietrov versus Vernon Deaton and George South. It went like 20 seconds. It was the worst 20 seconds I've seen in all of 2017 for sure. They're standing next together, and he runs out of the corner and sickles both of them at the same time. And he goes to hit the Russian hammer, which is where he jumps off the middle rope. He comes down, and his hand strikes his opponent in the throat, and they both go down.
No, they don't.
Well, that's on paper.
That's not what happened at all here.
That's the idea. He jumps off. If his opponent is like due north, he's headed way more northeast. He's flying off into space where there is no wrestler to hit. He reaches way outside with his hand, which briefly comes in contact with one of the geeks, whichever it was. The geek goes flying like he's Kevin Nash taking the finger poke of doom. And Vladimir Pietrov covers him for the win.
I know that everybody since last week has been waiting with bated breath for the day that I scream -6 stars. I'm not going to do it yet. But I got to tell you something. Up until this point in time, what was the date of this?
January 10th, 1987.
January 10, 1987. I am quite certain that up until this point in time, that was the worst match there had ever been on the planet Earth. It was so fucking bad. It was too short to be -6 stars. It was a solid -3 stars.
In 20 seconds.
In 20 seconds.
Think about this.
That has to be the worst short match I've ever seen. You know how hard it is to screw up a squash match that goes 20 seconds?
He found a way.
I mean, fucking impossible. Braun Strowman on his worst day.
Oh my God.
Was a miracle worker compared to this poor Vladimir Pietrov, who was thrown to the wolves because he was big, and they needed a Russian.
They needed a big, bald Russian. So, at the time this match ended, I was thinking to myself, Vincent, is this the worst wrestler you've ever seen in your life? I didn't come to a conclusion at that moment.
I think we need more time.
Hold off on that. Cornette was back for his third promo. So after Ellering's line about $22 funerals, he laid out $66 in cash and said, one for Hawk, one for Animal, one for Ball. I can only assume that they were all backstage saying, what the fuck is Paul Ellering saying? And Cornette turned to everyone and said, get out of your cash right now. I got an idea. He wanted the Midnight Express to get a U.S. Tag Team title shot against Wyndham and Garvin. He's going off about Garvin forever and ever and ever and ever. He says, Barry Windham, I don't know you too well, but stay out of my way. So, it is time for Ivan Koloff to wrestle. His opponent is Zane Smith.
Are you sure about that? Because I'm almost positive this was actually Alan Martin.
I wrote Zane Smith, and I remember thinking...
I wrote Zane Smith, too. But I also remember thinking, didn't I see this guy earlier? I'm positive this was Alan Smith.
Perhaps they are identical twins with one working under a pseudonym.
This had to be a rib where they brought this guy out, and they gave him a different name, just to see if anybody would notice. And no one did but me.
Well, my theory is... because Ivan had claimed this man had been hospitalized with a serious neck injury.
Excuse me, hospitalized?
I say that word wrong. Hospitalized?
Yes.
I hate that word. Anyway, clearly Smith was not hurt too bad. He's out here wrestling a week later. So...
No, Zane Smith was not the man who was killed.
What?
No.
What did I write down? I wrote Zane.
Tony Zane.
Oh! I got the wrong Zane.
Yes, Tony Zane and Zane Smith are different guys.
God almighty.
And I think Zane Smith is not Alan Martin. I'm not sure.
know. I apologize for getting my Zanes confused. All right.
They're not all the same guy. Because I know what Tony Zane looks like. He's the fat guy.
That's right.
That kind of looks like you.
A little bit like me.
But not as much as the other fat guy that looks like you.
Thank you.
There's the fat skinny guy that looks like you in high school. And then there's a fat guy that looks like you now.
Who's the Abraham Lincoln looking guy?
I can't remember.
Garner? Paul Garner?
It might be Paul
I
Garner.
think so, yeah.
How do we not remember these?
They go through so many. So it's Ivan Wrestling Zane Smith.
Dave's on the show the other day talking about wrestling in Northern California. And he's talking about the glory days and all of his friends. And he goes, man, we even knew all the names of the jobbers. And I'm like, shit, yeah, you knew the names of the jobbers. I know all the fucking names of the jobbers here. I can't tell these motherfuckers apart, but I know all of them.
You see them every week.
Because they're great.
Yes. So during this match here with Ivan Koloff and Vladimir Pietrov, once or twice, Zane Smith was thrown outside and Pietrov was asked to interfere. And when he was asked to throw strikes to a prone opponent or even just a standing opponent outside, this is where I determined for sure Vladimir Pietrov is the worst wrestler I ever saw.
Man, we're talking the great Khali.
You know who he reminds? What I described him. He is a guy who is like a dirt poor knockoff of the Warlord.
Oh man, do you even remember the Warlord when he was on this show?
We saw him on this show not long ago.
Oh,
Pietrov is worse.
I think this match was scheduled to go about 30 seconds. But a bunch of little kids started singing about how ugly Ivan was.
They were singing UGLY, you ain't got no alibi, you ugly.
Yeah.
In 87.
And I think that he was so entertained by this that he just stayed in the ring for 5 minutes.
It's possible. We had if this was a 5-minute match, 3 minutes was one standing face lock. I was praying this would be the finish. Just a standing guillotine. I saw a great Sasuke beat Dirt Bike Kid with one once. Finally, he takes Zane Smith to the corner. Hits a series of hammer fists to the top of the head. Just bopping him on the top of the head. And he goes up top and see driving knee to the back for the win. After the break, Nikita came out for a promo. He promised to take Ric Flair's world title. He caught up Pietrov and Uncle Ivan, and he ran his mouth for a while. Dick Murdoch versus Brody Chase.
This guy, Brody Chase, he not only had a mullet, but he was so serious about his craft of wrestling that he said, I want to get this mullet permed.
Yes.
And boy, did he ever. This was a beautiful, thick, voluptuous mullet. And he is mustachioed.
Oh, yeah.
On top of
he was a Magnum TA knockoff.
Now, the most notable thing about this match is Dick Murdoch gave Brody Chase the best backdrop that would be seen for 3 years. Because I believe it was Survivor Series 1990 that the Warlord almost killed Shawn Michaels with a backdrop. But there's no way that in between that Survivor Series and this match, there was a better backdrop than the one that he gave Brody Chase here.
The Warlord one may have been better. This was funnier.
That's undoubtedly true. There was nothing funny about Shawn's.
No.
I was like, dear God, my favorite wrestler is dead.
So Murdoch's doing a bunch of chain wrestling, and Murdoch's actually a really good wrestler. So he's doing all this cool hammerlock takedowns and holds. It's actually really awesome. And then he does this backdrop, and he whips the guy in, and he bends over, and Chase comes at him, and their timing is perfect, and Murdoch launches him, and Chase goes flying high into the air, and his power was great, but his trajectory was poor. And he was kind of spinning sort of half sideways, and he comes down from a great height. I honestly can't believe he didn't hit the lights in this tiny little studio. And he comes flying down, and he lands right on his ass in a full pike position.
That's the worst way to land on this backdrop.
Really bad. You're better off landing on your head.
Actually, the worst way would be if his feet had been a little off the ground, and he only landed on his tailbone.
Yes.
But other than that, this is the worst way to land.
Oh, God. I laughed and laughed and laughed, and Murdoch went with a brain buster. Then Ivan cut a quick promo and said Nikita's still afraid of Pietrov, and that was the end of the show. The show should have ended with a backdrop.
It should have.
Should have had him land, roll credits.
No, they should have had him land, and then they show the slow motion replay they always do, where they just show him going high in the air, and then he's about to land with a look of horror on his face, and then they go to the credits. Show was a lot more fun than I remembered.
It was a lot more fun to review than it was watching.
That's true.
And there will be gorilla shit all over the Omni.
Tournament. but the matches were pretty much horrible across the board. But the interviews were great, and it was fun. This was the most fun I've had watching wrestling, and I don't even know how long. This show was fucking fun.
And it was also newsworthy.
It was newsworthy.
There was stuff on this show.
But it was more fun than newsworthy.
Sure. It opened with clips of Barry Windham confronting Ric Flair after his squash. Flair was willing to fight him. We go to the studios, where Dusty Rhodes, who in this segment looked more like Eminem than I ever thought he could have possibly done, cuts a promo on Vladimir Petrov saying, "Don't you worry about Nikita, you put Vladimir Petrov against me." He threatened to tear Petrov's nose off.
That's what he said.
Mm-hmm. We had Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez versus Rocky King and William Tab.
That's right. He's no longer Big Bill Tab, although they called him that.
He's been Big Bill Tab for a year and a half.
That's right. On the graphic, they called him William Tab.
William Tab. So he's still the same guy, which is unfortunate. He's not very good. He's big, but he's not very good.
Listen, let's talk about Rocky King. You want to talk about not good? God bless Rocky King. Him and Manny Fernandez fucked up everything that you could possibly fuck up in the first 30 seconds of this match. It was astonishing how much they fucked up. I didn't even know it was possible to make that many mistakes in that short a period of time. And I had about 100 matches with you. Which reminds me, the more I watch these shows, I came up watching Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and Mr. Perfect and Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko and Rey Mysterio, and I had very high standards for my in-ring. The more wrestling I watched through the years, both old wrestling and new wrestling, the more I realized you were not bad at all. I used to think you were fucking horrible. Now I look back and I'm like, Vinny was a perfectly competent professional wrestler, and sometimes he was even good. You were better than almost every single jobber on this show, by a wide margin.
I was born too late.
Your match with Stoney Edwards,
Your favorite,
was better than every match I've ever seen with Vladimir Pietrov.
That's actually true.
And given the length of his career, I don't think he ever has a match better than that one. And that was your debut. And it was horrible.
Yeah, it was much better than Vladimir Pietrov. You're actually right there. Anyway, eventually they pin William Tab with a DDT.
Tab may as well have been made out of wood. You've never seen a guy not go up, and when he did go up, he was completely stiff and wooden.
Then when they tried, close to the finish there, they tried to just do a double backbreaker. Where they just both basically put themselves in a headlock, lift them up, and drop them across their knees. Most people listening to this right now, if they grab anyone listening to this, can grab two of their buddies and do this move pretty safely in their living room. Not William Tab. And I'm not blaming Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez for this.
This Rick Rude, every week, he's in with the worst.
Yeah. So they go to cut a promo. Paul Jones again saying they have too much class to defend these belts on television. Great line. Rude says the Road Warriors, they look mean and they talk mean, but he wants to find out if they're mean inside or they just have a costume exterior. That's the exact words he used. Costume exterior. Barry Windham comes out for a promo, and he explains that he had not wanted to stick his nose in anyone's business, but he went out there because the Horsemen were attacking Tim Horner and whoever the other guy was. He wanted to stick up for his friends, and this is what happened. And what happened was, he called out Flair, Flair called his bluff, they started fighting, and apparently it was deemed as a verbal contract, and there was a match with the referee counting pinfalls and everything. So the Horsemen were out there, but they were just watching. We've talked about this last week. The Horsemen want to win, and they want to win clean because it makes the babyfaces look bad. They would rather win clean than win dirty.
Not only that, I'm just going to cut to the finish so you can talk about the rest of the match. Flair gives him everything. He gives him every move in the book. He's kicking out of everything. Until finally, Barry hits a big-ass lariat. And the Horsemen, they have not interfered one time. Actually, JJ does interfere once. Yeah. But other than that, they've been waiting on the outside the whole time. But they know there's no way Flair's kicking out of this lariat. And that's when they all hit the ring.
Yes.
But they had complete faith in Ric Flair for every other spot during this match. Every other move that Barry hit the man with, they knew our man Ric Flair can kick out of this move until that lariat came.
That's right.
Then it was like, he ain't kicking out of this, and they hit the ring.
So Dusty and the Rock and Rolls came out to be in Barry's corner to equal out the Horsemen. It turned into a lumberjack match, with Flair getting thrown out and then thrown back in, and the announcers even made the same observation. So Wyndham's running wild, hooks a figure four, but he's too close to the ropes, so Tully takes the ref, and Dillon from the outside reaches in and rakes Wyndham's eyes to break up the hold. And then to double down on the cheating, Flair immediately crotches Barry on the top rope while the ref's back is still turned, because the Horsemen are really good at cheating. So Barry comes back, slams Flair off the top, hits a missile dropkick, and Barry Windham, of course, is really big. And watching Barry Windham throw a missile dropkick made me really realize how small this ring was. And he hits a lariat and makes a cover, and everyone joins in for the DQ, and there's a big brawl going on, and whatever show this was ends, the the end credits roll, and Barry cuts a promo into the TV cameras. The house couldn't hear him, but we at home could. Says, he warns Ric Flair there's a new world champion coming, and we're looking at him. This was awesome, from start to finish.
This was a great match. Same one you've seen every single time you've seen Ric Flair wrestle.
Yeah.
It's still great every time.
This was 6 minutes.
It's amazing how
7 minutes.
how many ways Flair can think of for another guy to beat his ass.
Oh, yes.
You can just see him the whole match. He's going 1,000 miles an hour. And every moment he's trying to figure out a way to give the other guy the match back.
Yeah. So they go to commercial. They come back. We are now back in the Peachtree Studios. And Flair is there for a promo. Subdued somewhat, mainly because they just showed him get his ass kicked. There were some fans that were chanting at him. I don't know what they were chanting, but it was clearly anti-Flair. But other fans shushed them because they wanted to hear what Ric Flair had to say so bad. So Flair says what we had just seen was a tremendous contest between two great athletes, but at the end of the day, he still had the world championship belt, and that means he had been the winner. He went off on how, as great as Wyndham was, he still had to prove he was at a world championship level, and while he was out there, he ran down all the other babyfaces as well. Had the Kansas Jayhawks versus Alan West and Eddie Roberts.
You know, oftentimes there's a main eventer that doesn't have a great physique. But I'm pretty sure that this was the first time that we saw a squash match where both of the jobbers had better physiques than both of the main eventers. Alan West and Eddie Roberts both had better physiques.
Definitely than Bobby Jaggers. Bobby Jaggers and Trent Seven may have the same physique now that I think about it.
Dutch Mantel, I never noticed this till just now. I don't even know how, but this guy not only had a mullet, but he had a rat tail.
Dutch was awesome.
The mullet was actually cut halfway down so that there could be a tail coming out of the mullet.
That's amazing.
I've never seen that before.
That's astounding.
That is astounding.
So the announcers let everyone know, any day now, the videotape of Starrcade will be available on sale. Just to keep in mind how things change.
Yeah, I watched a UK championship tournament live on my television.
Yes.
Via Apple TV on the internet. Mm-hmm. These guys have been working on the videotape production of Starrcade for 30 days now.
Yeah, it's almost on sale. This, if you were not aware, is the best time ever to be a wrestling fan. I think it's pretty patently obvious, but it needs to be stated. Back in the day, you had to wait 30 days to purchase Starrcade 86 on VHS and then wait for it to get shipped back to you. Things have changed. Anyway, there's a long, boring squash. The Jayhawks won with a lariat. Lex Luger made his Saturday night debut.
He sure did.
He's joining the announcers. He's in a sweet suit. He's tall. He's tan. He's got a great mullet. He's very well spoken.
Kind of.
Well,
he was not a good promo at all, but he tried. He got much better.
He would get much better.
Lex Luger got much, much better over the years. He was never Ric Flair.
No.
But
he was never The Rock.
He got a lot better.
Yeah. But he explained that he was, in fact, the total package. He was everything you'd want from an athlete physically and also everything you'd want from an athlete intellectually, a college graduate like himself. So promoters around the country had been begging him to come wrestle, offering him blank checks, all the money he wanted. But he had come to Jim Crockett Promotions to face the best competition and to make the most money. And he noted that the most successful group in Jim Crockett Promotions, the group that made the most money, was the Four Horsemen. And thus, that was the group he wanted to be in. And he said this, he turned to the announcers and said, "Thank you." And he walked away. And they were gobsmacked.
This man wants to be in the Four Horsemen.
I'm talking staring into the camera slack-jawed.
I think, to be fair Tony Schiavone was slack-jawed. But David Crockett was like, what man wouldn't want to be a horseman? I sure do.
As much as I hate him. Barry Windham versus Thunderfoot number 2. This was the...
Thunderfoot number 2, everybody.
Yeah, there's multiple Thunderfoots.
I have no evidence that this was not Thunderfoot number 1. Thunderfoot number 1 came out later. I couldn't tell a difference. I won't lie. I wasn't paying that close of attention.
So Barry is wrestling this match. The announcers are still talking about Lex wanting to be a horseman, noting that Lex and Barry had been wrestling in Florida. They knew each other well. So Barry wins this match with a lariat. And as they're showing the replay, you hear his voice. He's at the announce desk. He says, gentlemen, I'm sorry. I know I'm not supposed to be here. I know this is my time, but I just have to say, I know Lex Luger. There's no way Lex would really want to be a horseman. I'm going to go talk to him. And he left.
Oh, man. Some drama here.
They go to commercial, and they come back. Out come J.J. Dillon, the Andersons, and Tully Blanchard for a promo. It's really just Ole Anderson doing the talking.
Ole Anderson said... This is what he threatened to do, everybody. This is not a typo, nor am I making this up. He said they were going to cut Barry Windham's nose off right around his neck.
I think he was...
What the fuck does that mean?
He had been talking... I don't know. Dusty made the threat earlier about tearing off Pietrov's nose. So Ole was riffing on Dusty, and he moved from Dusty to... Barry tied that line, and I don't think he thought it through very well.
He didn't think it through. Nor did he think what he was going to wear through very well.
Well, no.
This fucking jacket he was wearing. I make fun of him for his T-shirts, but his T-shirts he makes at the mall were way better than this jacket.
I just love... I guess we've been watching this show for almost a year and a half, somewhere around there. But it's been 3 years in the sense it was 86, 87. I guess we're in 87 now. It was 2 years. Did we start in 85?
I think we
started. It was 85, 86, 87. I think we watched a little bit in 85.
Yeah.
The point being, we have now seen the new year come twice in these shows.
Yeah.
And each time Ole says, it's 1986. Dusty Rhodes, this year I retire you. I didn't get it done, so it comes out in January. And Dusty Rhodes, I don't know how, I don't know when, but we're going to take you out. He just moves on.
He just moves on.
He never admits defeat.
No, of course not. Of course not.
This led to an astounding match. I don't know the genius who put this team together. Dick Murdoch and Baron von Raschke. Captain Redneck teaming with the evil German as a babyface team. Versus Randy Barber and Gary Royal.
You know, I saw Captain Redneck and the Baron. I wrote down, what a superstar team. And then I thought about it, and it was like, what a jobber team. Randy Barber remains maybe the most horrific jobber they have. He's, God bless the guy, he's got nothing going for him.
He cannot possibly have been trained. He had to have shown up and said, I have a singlet and boots. And they said, hit the ring.
And then we got Gary Royal. And I was looking at him. And I was like, who in the hell does this guy look like? He looks like somebody. And it finally hit me that he is a cross between Jerry the King Lawler and Kenny Bolin. Was he not?
Oh, what a creature from hell you have just described.
Was he not?
I hadn't thought of it and I had to go back and check.
I was going to tell you the time, but I want to kill my own joke. But if you would have seen it, you would have went, oh my God, it is. It's their love child.
All I know is the announcer spent this entire match noticing that the Horsemen had nothing to say about Lex Luger. And Baron and Murdoch used a variety of arm holds in these jobbers for a while. And finally, Murdoch goes to pin Randy Barber with a brainbuster. And this is like the second or third week in a row this has happened. When I say these guys aren't trained, when someone gives you a brainbuster or a suplex, part of taking that move, even if the guy's capable of doing it on his own, he's going to grab your left hand and throw it over his head. You take your right hand, you place on his hip so you can post up and help him hold you straight up in the air. These guys have no idea what to do with their free arm.
He didn't have that weird Tyrannosaurus arm.
There was one guy last year who was like hanging it straight up in the air and then hanging it straight down. This guy just stuck out to the side. It's just out there like a chicken wing. And Murdoch drops him on his head and pins him.
I was very impressed with this shoot brainbuster.
It may as well have been.
Until
it was not the best brainbuster
later.
On the show.
Which is interesting, by the way. Two guys doing the same move in the same territory.
Yeah. And Garvin has mentioned it at least once. But maybe they're holding off for the Brainbuster versus Brainbuster feud.
I can't wait for that one.
But because you see...
That would actually be an amazing match.
Oh, it'd be awesome. Oh, Dick Murdoch and Jimmy Garvin?
Good
Oh.
Dick Murdoch really is.
Because it was about the personalities and wins and losses, although on this particular show, obviously the wins and losses were never in doubt. But it's about the personalities and the rivalries and the promos and the championships. There were moves, but because it was not about the moves, it was okay to have two guys doing the same finisher. It wasn't that big a deal. Now, because it's about moves first and foremost, maybe after entrance music, now it's critical. Every guy has to have some move that nobody else does.
The other thing here is Captain Redneck hits his brainbuster and they show the replay. And in the background, you can see the Baron. And he's so excited in slow motion. And then when he hits the move, the Baron shakes a fist. And maybe it's because I was doing like Taekwondo and karate from a very young age, but when you make a fist, like if you're going to punch somebody, you take your hand and you curl all your fingers in one knuckle at a time, and then you wrap your thumb over the fingers.
We don't have webcams, so I'll tell people that
But
Brian
you got
has
that?
just made a fist.
I just made a
the
fist.
thumb is on the outside.
Yeah. But then there's the weird fist that like Trump and other people make that I see all the time, which is where you take your hand and you make your fingers flat and put them against your palm, and then you just rest the thumb on top. And this is the old person fist.
That's more of a thumbs up with the fingers closed.
It's kind of a thumbs up, yeah. That's what the Baron did.
I see.
I laughed. I was like, come on, buddy. Make a real fist. Not this gimmick fist.
The Road Warriors came out for a promo. They did not have the spiked shoulder pads, going for the more subdued spiked vests instead.
You know, that's another one. Why do people do the thumbs up like that? Like, the thumbs up should be you curl in all your fingers, and then your thumb, like, sticks way up in the air.
I don't know.
Have you never hitchhiked, goddammit? It's just weird.
So they called
these things
out...
bother me.
They called out the Awesome Twosome. They promised to defend their six-man titles. Hawk was talking about Rude's cute little abdominal muscles, and then said, if I want to eat Twinkies, I'm going to eat Twinkies. There you go.
You know what was interesting about this was the Road Warriors do this promo, and Animal and Hawk took the promo by Rude and Manny Fernandez very seriously. They were very, very angry about what they'd said about him. And I was fixing to make fun of them and talk about how gotten to they were. And then I realized, what the hell's wrong with you, Brian? You've been ruined by this business.
Yeah.
The good guys should be furious at what the bad guys said about them. It's probably Kevin Nash responsible for this, but the days where you laugh off what somebody says about you, that's fine in real life. But in pro wrestling, when a bad guy says something about the good guy's got to get mad. Otherwise, why the fuck are you even doing promos in the first place?
Yes. I would argue it would go the same way for the heels.
It should go the same way to the heels.
If the Road Warriors had come out and called them out first and made
the
fun
heels
of...
should have been mad.
Yeah. The whole point is for guys to come out here and pick fights. And you can't pick a fight with a guy who's not offended by what you say.
Exactly. This business is all fucked up now. The very fact that I was going to make fun of them tells you how much this business is fucked up.
It's warped you.
It has warped me. They were right to be angry.
Yes.
They were right to be furious.
Midnight Express and Big Bubba versus Larry Stevens and David Isley and Ronnie Angle.
Oh, God.
This match ruled.
Now, to be fair, I think his name was Ronnie Angle.
It was on the graphics as Ronnie Angle.
But Cornette kept calling him Ronnie Angel.
Tommy Angel, in fact.
Tommy Angel. Which is from a song, but
Yeah.
maybe his name was Ronnie Angel.
I have no idea.
Point is, he sucked.
He did.
He was so goddamn bad. Let me tell you how bad this guy was. This guy was so bad that not only could he not sell a thing, but when you knocked him down, he kept getting back up. This is the worst thing that you can do as a jobber.
Yes.
When the bad guys, when the heels or the baby faces, when the main eventers knock you down, stay the fuck down. Because when they knock you down and you just keep getting up, it makes them look bad.
Uh-huh.
And two things are going to happen. They're going to be nice and get nothing out of the match, or they're going to be Rick Rude and they're going to beat the shit out of you.
Yes.
This fucking guy, every time they knocked him down, he just got up. I was like, stay down, dude.
My favorite was Condrey hit him with the funniest body slam I've seen in a while. I'm not sure I can describe this accurately, but he picks him up for a slam, and it looks like every other body slam you ever saw. And he's holding him sideways, like Mark Henry does with the World's Strongest Slam. Only he didn't. You know, when you slam a guy, you either release him just above the mat, or you go down with him like a power slam. Condrey's got him up on his chest and then just drops him from that height. Except it wasn't even a drop. It was like he threw him down from that height.
Yeah, he's probably not confident this guy was going to turn over, so he just sack of shit at him.
Basically, yes.
I don't know if that's a word. He SOS'd him.
We had Big Bubba. One of them tried a single leg takedown on Big Bubba. And Bubba, all he did was he just raised his leg. It wasn't even like a kick. He just raised his leg, and the guy goes flying through the air. Because he was a jobber, and that one knew what to do. We had Bubba hitting a 350-pound enziguri. And finally, the Midnight Express...
Bubba is way better already.
Yeah. Shocking.
Way better.
Shocking.
It is kind of shocking when you see guys that have been in NXT for 4 years and they're still fucking horrible.
That's actually
and
true.
Big Bubba's been around for a year and a half now, and he's 1,000 times better.
That actually is
probably
a very
less
good
than a
point.
year and a half.
Yeah. So, the Express hits the rocket launcher. And Bobby Eaton gets up, and he's walking around the ring. And I'm thinking to myself, that's weird. They usually use this as a finish. And then Bobby gets down, and he makes a cover.
No. First, he fixed his mullet.
He fixes his mullet, walks in a circle for a while.
Which is hard to mess up, by the way. If you've ever had a mullet, you can mess it up. But he fixed it anyway.
He makes a cover, and the ref counts 2, and Eaton gets up. He doesn't pick the man up. He just lifts himself up. Then he puts a finger on the man's chest, and the ref counts 2, and then Eaton pulls his finger up. And then finally, Eaton puts a finger on the man's face, and the ref counts 3, and the Express win. This match was awesome. Did I mention
Well,
that?
it was funny because he put the finger in the middle of the guy's chest, and the ref starts to count. And then he moved the finger up, which should have broken the count, but the ref counted. And then he moved it one more time, and the ref counted again and just called for the bell.
Yes.
Like, I'm not doing this 8 fucking times. The match is over.
God, this is great.
Now, the other thing, I got to talk about this interview segment. Now, I don't know if this is true, because I'm not a cruel bastard. But I have heard that if you, for example, took several pots of boiling water and you blindfolded somebody and you said, get ready, like it's like an initiation, and then you get a ice cold water they don't know about, and they think that you're going to stick their finger in the boiling water, but instead you stick it in the ice water, they'll still freak out like they got burned.
Sure.
It's so goddamn cold that they think it's hot.
Sure.
Dennis Condrey is so fucking ugly that he's beautiful.
It is amazing.
I stand by this.
Cornette's out there cutting his usual fiery motor mouth promo, and his men are just encircling him, all making strange faces. But Condrey was the star of the show, because he's looking into the camera. And as we have discussed, his time in this territory is not long.
He's so over it
He
at this
don't
point.
care. He is looking into the camera. He appears to be in deep thought, stroking his beard. And he does a people's eyebrow at the camera for no reason. And he rests his chin on his fist, still in thought. And he stands up and I've talked about nobodies in the show quite a bit. Dennis Condrey was not a nobody, but he wasn't a good body either.
No.
He's hairy. He's whitish.
He's got a random horrible tattoo.
One ugly tattoo in the middle of his arm. Got a gut. Forehead's all scarred up. Got his beard. Got his mullet. Got the white trash bandana around his neck. And you just can't not look at him.
He's just staring at the camera like a creep. It's so awesome. Yeah. He's so hideous. He is uglier than every one of Los Guapos, who made a career out of being ugly.
Yeah. I have no idea. Oh, I think, by the way, in here...
all you need to know is Cornette was on fire.
Cornette was hyping up the upcoming Big Bubba Dusty Rhodes Bunkhouse Championship match. At the very end here, I believe Condrey tore off a piece of the format and ate it.
Why not?
Because he's Dennis Condrey. Ivan Koloff and Vladimir Pietrov came out for a promo. They said nothing, and this led to Vladimir Pietrov versus Zane Smith.
The key is they believe that Nikita is now too comfortably American, and Vladimir needs to take him back to the old country. Which, when you watch him wrestle, that's bound to happen. He mistimed everything in this match.
Listen. Last week, I stated that Vladimir Pietrov was the worst wrestler I've ever seen. So I had low standards going in for this match.
Now, are you counting, like, the Survivor chick?
No.
Okay. Like an actual wrestler.
People who attempted to make a full-time career out of this. Not the random celebrity encounters. I'm sure if I went back and watched Charmel and Jenna again, it would be worse than Vladimir Pietrov. But
I'm not sure, actually. I am not sure.
Vladimir Pietrov... First of all, Zane's just as bad as Vladimir Pietrov, so this did not help. Vladimir is big, and he goes for the gut-wrench backbreaker that 1,000 guys have used, such as Bret Hart comes to mind. There's a million other guys who've done this move. So he picks this man up, and he's standing there. You won't believe me. None of you will believe me when I tell you this. You'll think I'm joking or that I made a mistake.
I saw it, and I still can't believe it. This move is impossible to mess up. You can't.
No, I couldn't.
Gravity makes it impossible to fuck this up, and I'm still not sure how he fucked it up, but he did.
On rare occasions when I wrestled, I would do this move where you drop him and then stand back up and drop him again. Okay? And I sucked, but I could do this, and I could do an advanced version of this move he tried. And I wasn't as big as Vladimir Pietrov. Vladimir Pietrov lifts this man up with a gut wrench. He's got one arm around the man's waist. He's got his left arm around the man's leg. And he's about to drop the small of his back across his own knee. And then he tried to drop him across both knees. It didn't work. It didn't work.
It's not only that, it's the timing. It's like you lift them up and then you bring them down. But he was like lifting the guy and then he let go of him as he was still going up. And the guy went down while he was going up. Then the guy landed and then he kept going down. I can't even describe it except it was an impossibility that he pulled off.
So Petrov then won with the flying hammer, which appeared to kill the man, because as they were doing a promo afterwards, they had the referee and geeks trying to scrape him off the mat and get him out of the ring.
Yeah, they had wrestlers come out to help Smith afterwards, when they should have come out before the match to help Petrov.
So they went to commercial. Dylan came out for another promo. He said the Four Horsemen were the dominant group in wrestling. He talked for a long time about how great they were, all the championships they won, all the money they had. And he got hundreds of calls a week from people who wanted to be horsemen. He didn't have time for any of that, and they were not looking for expansion. But he had to admit, his ears had perked up when Luger had mentioned his desire to join the group, and he was out here to get a closer look at the man. So he was out there to watch Lex Luger versus George South.
Luger was a billion times better than Vladimir Pietrov.
Oh my God.
But he was still very wooden.
He had an A+ physique, of course.
A lot smaller than the 90s. He was very, very lean and probably, I'd say, 25 pounds lighter.
As he removed his robe and showed off his physique, they cut to two women in the crowd with horrifying makeup, who I believe were supposed to be lusting after him. You can see this all for yourself. It is currently the GIF of the week at WrestleCrap. So you load that up and get an eyeful for yourself. So this match went like a minute. It was mostly forearms to the back, and then Lex won with a torture rack and flexed his pecs.
Let's talk about the real notable thing about this match. It went a minute.
Yes.
It was a lot of forearms.
Yes.
It was one rack.
Yes.
They go to interview Luger. He's near death.
I've never seen a man this blown up in a promo. Ever.
He was gasping for breath.
I don't know, perhaps it was nerves?
Vladimir Pietrov isn't breathing this hard after his matches. And trust me, he expends a lot more energy.
So Lex is huffing and puffing his way through saying he wants to join the Horsemen. Wyndham comes out and says, Lex, you don't know these men. You don't know the terrible things they've done to Dusty Rhodes. You don't know the terrible things they've done to me. And Lex says, Barry, I know you, but this is a business. And my goal, I retired from football early, he's sure to say. And my goal is to make a lot of money in wrestling and retire from wrestling early. And Barry is disgusted. I can't talk to you right now. And he walks away. Tim Horner versus Thunderfoot number 1.
I just love it. There's 2 Thunderfoots, and they had a command decision that Thunderfoot number 2 was going to work first. Thunderfoot number 1 was going to come out later. These are the kind of things that blow my mind in wrestling.
I love that Tim Horner was sent out here with Thunderfoot number 1 with the instructions, get yourself over. So he had a back and forth match and one with a flash roll up out of nowhere.
What's funny, this was, I guess, a name against a jobber, and they had a competitive match. If you took any kind of a name on Raw, who would be an equivalent to Tim Horner on Raw? That's a tough one. A low-card babyface.
I had to look at the Raw roster, actually.
Anyway, imagine that guy.
Truth.
All right, imagine R-Truth versus random Carolina jobber for 5 minutes on TV in a competitive match.
Yes.
Imagine the crowd reaction. This fucking crowd's going crazy.
Sure.
They loved this match. They were in every moment of it.
So he won with the O'Connor roll. At this point, I wrote down, the cure for Tim Horner is Jimmy Valiant coming out for a promo.
This was where I wrote, this show is so fun.
Yes.
And I thought, this is the kind of thing that the UK Championship tournament was missing.
Jimmy Valiant.
Oh, it sure was.
All shows are missing Jimmy Valiant.
He had nothing to say.
He
just came out to have fun.
He plugged nothing. He said he wanted to give Tony the key to New York City, but he forgot it. All he had was his house key.
I can't believe he has a house.
I
was sure he lived in a bus.
I'm sure he meant trailer. So he asked the people to come out and support him because he loved them all. He assaulted Tony Schiavone, had his way with him, and that was that.
And Tony's like, can we get our ass to the ring, please?
He actually outright said, please go to the ring.
I loved it.
Jimmy Garvin versus Bill Mulkey. So we've mentioned Jimmy's a great promo and a great act and a pretty dull wrestler. This is one of his better squashes, even before the finish. He's out there perhaps emulating his brother Ronnie. He's showing off what great punches he has. And he'll punch the man, the Mulkey will go down, and Jimmy will celebrate, and they'll do that for a while. And he fucks with him, so he holds him there so Precious can tell him what a piece of trash he is. And eventually it is time for the finish. And as we mentioned, Jimmy Garvin's finish is the same finish Dick Murdoch uses, the Brainbuster.
Yeah.
But they do it very differently. Dick Murdoch does a delayed suplex, holds the guy up there about 5-6 seconds, and then falls to his back and drops the guy in his head. Garvin lifts the man up, sits straight down on his own ass, drops the guy on his head and pinned him. But it's more of a fast move. Well, this time apparently he wanted to stress the difference. Because he hooks him for a suplex. He lifts the guy up, and as they're going up, everything looks normal. And then when it comes time to drop him, Garvin dropped this man at supersonic speed down to the mat. Just up, down you're dead.
Sometimes a guy goes up, and he's kind of a little bit arched, and he comes down on his shoulders, and then he folds to the mat. Sometimes the guy goes up, and you drop him, but his feet go on the other side. So it's like he's starting a backward roll or something like that. I have seen Austin Aries, Tenryu, Benoit, Guerrero, Dick Murdoch. Who else has done brainbusters?
Takamichi
Noku. Point of this is, I never in my life saw a better brainbuster than the one that I saw Jimmy fucking Garvin do on this Mulkey. It's not easy to rewind on this Apple TV. Boy, did I rewind. I was in another room, basically, and I saw it from a mile away, and I screamed at the top of my lungs. I got a sleeping child, didn't matter. I screamed. I said, oh my God, we got to watch that again. Went and watched it again. It was even better the second time. He went straight up and straight down. You know what the best part was? I bet that Mulkey didn't even feel it.
I bet not.
It was awesome.
It was great. Brad Armstrong versus Vernon Deaton. This was so bad it was fun. First of all, you've got Brad apparently shooting on him with the worst half Nelson you ever saw. has failed to get a win. So he goes to pick the guy up and hit a dropkick. If you've ever seen almost any match ever, you've seen a man grab his opponent by the head, pull him to his feet, hit a standing dropkick. Well, Deaton never got to his feet. Deaton never got off his knees. But Brad threw his dropkick anyway, and his feet went flying high over Deaton's head, and Deaton never reacted. This looked so bad. This was such amateur hour, first match of your career indie bullshit. Armstrong won with a leg sweep.
I wonder if there's something about having to work with absolutely terrible people that makes you a much, much better worker. Granted, you got to go in there with people who really know what they're doing to really learn how to work. But there's something to be said for working with somebody so bad that you constantly have to try to fix the fucking match when it falls apart.
That's true.
And there was a lot of that in these jobber matches on this show here.
The Superpowers came out for a promo. I don't know if I'm getting worse or Nikita's getting worse, but I have no idea what he said here.
I think you're getting worse.
Tell me what Nikita said then.
He said he'd take on anybody, including Luger or Vladimir Pietrov.
I see.
Bring it on. He'll defend his title.
So Dusty called out Pietrov, Luger, and the Four Horsemen. He made a comment here about how he had been on 200-some magazine covers because he's a big star.
Probably true.
I'm sure it was. But they go to commercial and they come back out.
A lot of damn magazines they had back in the day.
They did. But they go to commercial and they come back and Flair is addressing Dusty.
Got to talk about this. Flair is very impressed by Luger. He says he was very slick and custom made. He said, Lex Luger is a man who'd rather wear a suit than a headband.
That's right.
He'd rather ride a limo than wear a bad T-shirt. One of these bad T-shirts with stuff written on it. And I was like, that's Ole's gimmick, dude.
Well, he's talking about Nikita.
I know.
Yeah.
But I was laughing because he's making fun of something that his guy does. But I guess it doesn't count when it's a horseman.
No. I just love, two things. He goes off for a while about how Dusty wants to be a horseman, or Lex wants to be a horseman, not one of Dusty's friends, and how great they are, and he runs down Dusty. But I can't strongly enough express how much I love that they have made Lex Luger a hot commodity on day one.
Day one.
Segment one, really.
Yeah.
But he's the guy. I think of all they have set up here in about an hour, a little more than an hour of TV. He wants to be a horseman because they're the best, but this also means he's a man of questionable character. He has a friend who knows him well, who thinks he's wrong-headed, not thinking things through, trying to talk him out of it. He has the evil crew who admire him and think he may in fact be on their level and may in fact be a horseman one day. You've got the all-American hero who is furious that this guy's going to come in, this young punk is going to come in, he's got a little bit of a body, and he thinks he's good enough to be in the group that Dusty hates. There is so much going on here, and it's all so simple.
That's true, but they also had the built-in gimmick that PWI had made Luger a star. And he really was all over all of these magazines.
He really was PWI Rookie of the Year.
That's right, and so if you were a fan of any level of fandom, you knew about Lex Luger. He didn't show up completely out of nowhere. It's not like bringing up a guy from NXT and building a story around him and you're supposed to buy it as a fan. I mean, fans knew this guy was the real deal.
That's right.
And he looked great.
He looked unbelievably great. Now we must talk about... Let me rephrase that. Now we get to talk about Tully Blanchard versus Randy Mulkey.
These Mulkeys are legends. Mulkeys and Tully Blanchard all should go into the Hall of Fame.
I can't tell you how great this match was. I cannot do it justice. Tully's gimmick, beyond being awesome and beyond being the TV champion, is that now he will personally give $10,000 in cash of his own money to anyone who can beat him. And of course, JJ has to have the cash in hand just to wave it around.
Oh, yeah.
So the match begins, and Tully is at the ropes talking to JJ, who's on the apron. His back is to the ring. He's like leaning on the ropes. They're double-checking the money, making sure that's there, making sure their plan is intact. The bell rings, and Mulkey says, "This is my chance." And Randy Mulkey runs across the ring. He grabs Tully around the waist to use an O'Connor roll. A move we have seen can lead to victory on this very show.
That's right. It's like the schoolboy nowadays.
Kinda. He goes to the O'Connor roll. He grabs his arms around Tully's waist. He goes to roll backward, and Tully barely flinches. Doesn't turn around, doesn't go down, certainly, doesn't do anything. Mulkey tries a few more times to pull him down. Eventually, Tully looks over his shoulder back at the guy, and he waits for Randy to pop his head back into position, and then hits a one back elbow and drops him to the mat. Because the Mulkeys were great jobbers.
Oh, they were great jobbers.
Tully beats him up for a while.
Flair's commanding Tully to slap him around, so Tully slaps him around.
He slaps him around, and he sort of gives the Mulkey offense, which is where he gives the Mulkey a chance to throw punches, and they're all punches to the body, and Tully's doing kind of a Muhammad Ali thing of dodging them or absorbing them but no selling. But he's just letting this Mulkey punch himself out. And it goes on and on and on for about 15 seconds, and then Tully hits like one shot, and the Mulkey goes down it again. This is beautiful. This match was beautiful. Takes him over to the ropes, fish hooks him so Flair can scream, "You're not good enough to be a horseman, Randy Mulkey. Maybe you can be a superpower." So Tully goes to the middle rope. He waits. And he waits. And he waits. He checks an imaginary watch on his wrist. And he waits. And at last the Mulkey figures it out and gets to his feet. Tully drops a diving elbow to the neck. And then finishes him off with a slingshot suplex. 5 stars. That was a 5-star squash.
This was a wonderful squash
I could have watched
match.
this right immediately again.
I thought that Tully was smelling his own armpit to make sure he was still fresh before he did that move there at the end.
Maybe that's it.
One way or the other, this was awesome.
So the Horsemen came out to cut a promo. Arn was talking about how everyone claimed to be the best, but the Horsemen really were the best. It's no wonder Lex wanted to join them. Tully says, "Look, we can jump people from behind better than anybody." Not denying it. He's owning the fact that they will do vicious, nasty, underhanded tactics. But we can also wrestle better than anybody. That's what's on the marquee. And that's why we've got the glory. That's why we've got the money. That's why we've got the women. And he's going off, and they all put their hands together and salute, and the announcers are wrapping it up, and just as this thing fades to black, Flair shows off his shoes and how nice they are.
And they all laugh and cackle.
They're all so happy.
And the show ends, and you're just thinking, well, of course Lex Luger wants to be a horseman.
Oh, hell yes.
This is the coolest group of guys ever.
Yeah.
God, this show was awesome. The show was so awesome. It was so fun. There was virtually no good wrestling whatsoever.
How dare
But this
you?
is proof that you don't need a lot of good wrestling to have a great show.
No.
And even the bad wrestling was fun.
That's the key. There was no boring wrestling on the show.
There was no...
There was
There was a little boring wrestling.
Yeah,
Let's
there was
not
some.
lie.
But by and large, there were no 8-minute matches that seemed like the same match 5 times in a row.
No.
Like you see on Raw.
This was a beautiful wrestling, a professional wrestling television studio show.
You know what? For what it was, this show was great.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
It wasn't Wrestle Kingdom.
No, if you listen to this show every week, and for some reason you don't actually go back and watch these shows, listen to me. Go back 30 years ago this week. It's like January 17 of 1987, I think is the date of the show. Is that right? January 17, 87?
Let me double check that.
Go back to the network
11787
and watch this show. And then you will be a follower of this program for life. Because it's such a great show. All right, everybody, that's it.
So let's get funky like a monkey.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, NWA Championship Wrestling from January 24th, 1987.
So listen, now that I've cleared my throat, I can concentrate again. So earlier, we warned everybody that there was going to be a mullet that we were going to talk about tonight that would make Ultimo Guerrero's mullet pale in comparison. Now, it was not the mullet that Tony Schiavone was sporting here on this show. Tony Schiavone, did he always have a mullet?
Sometimes.
I mean, he had to have, because you can't just grow a mullet overnight.
That's true.
His mullet was markedly different this week than it was on the show last week.
Well, he had a mullet, which is not, I don't think it was new, but what was new about it, which made you take notice, is that the top part of his hair, the top part of his head, it was like parted down the middle, but the part in the very middle was spiked up like a mohawk.
It was a well-groomed mullet.
No.
Yeah, it actually was.
This cannot have been his intention to look this way.
No, it had to have been. Somebody went and he got all done up for this television show.
Someone parted down his hair in the
You know who he looked like? He looked like the Red Rooster.
That's
without
exactly
the red...
what I was going to say. He
Yep.
forgot to dye the hair.
He forgot the what's the thing called? On the top of the cock? You know what I'm talking about? That red thing?
You should see a doctor.
Now,
all right.
With that said, I got one other thing I have to say. Before you came over, we had the TV on, just on some random channel. I don't know what we'd been watching, the news or something. And on TV is the movie Pretty Woman, which came out in 1990.
All right.
Which means it was probably filmed in about 1988, and the story was probably written before that. Mm-hmm. So even though the movie came out in 1990, the movie was such an 80s movie.
Yes.
It was just pure 80s. Materialism, the whole 9 yards. And man, I watched that movie and then I watched this show. I don't know. It's just like, goddamn, I lived through that.
Yeah.
That was just fucked up. This whole decade of the 80s is just so crazy. And I watch it now and Flair's out there and Luger's out there talking about how he wants money and this money lifestyle. And J.J. Dillon's walking around with $10,000 cash. It's all about the money and the suits. And man, what a lesson I got here about a time in my life.
The catchphrase of the 80s was, greed is good.
Dude, I didn't know anything about greed at that age. I was like...
everyone else did.
I was between 10 and 15 years old. I guess between 5 and 15, but, you know.
Who cares?
God, this movie, I'm not going to do a movie review, but I was just watching it, and I just couldn't take my eyes off the screen.
Well,
I just couldn't believe this movie.
She is a good-looking woman.
Not just that. Just everything about it was just... It just blew my mind. Maybe all movies are like that. I don't watch a lot of movies.
If you went back and watched Shaft, you'd be amazed by the 70s.
Sure.
Or Kramer versus Kramer is another one. Yes. Fashions change, attitudes change, and when you go back and look at what was accepted then, it blows your mind. When we were on our honeymoon, we watched a movie called The Quiet Man, which is available in the hotel room because it was filmed in that area. So I think there's a copy in every room, I think. It's a John Wayne movie. And the climax of this movie is John Wayne, his wife tries to leave him, and he physically goes to the train station and grabs her and drags her back through town to their house. And this draws a crowd, and it's meant to be played for comedy. And the whole town comes out to watch, and the crowd is growing and growing and growing. And as John Wayne is dragging his wife through the field back to their house, an old woman runs up, hands him a stick, and says, "Here is a stick to beat her with."
Wow.
And I screamed.
Vinny, that's the way things used to be back in the day.
Apparently.
The other thing is, there's a scene where he wants to hire her for a week.
Mm-hmm. A prostitute.
Yeah. And she says, well, you know, it's going to cost you, because she knows he's got money.
All right.
Because there's so many things I could do a full review here.
Go for it.
But I mean, she's a worker.
Yes.
They're both workers.
Yes.
That's what they both determine.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, she's saying it's going to cost you, because, you know, he's the mark. She goes, it'll be $4,000 for the week. Mm-hmm. And he goes, now hold on a second. It's $300 a night. $2,000. And then they barter back and forth, and they agree on $3,000. And I just remember watching it going, $300? I'm in the wrong town. Or I would have been in the wrong town 10 years ago. Anyway.
What would you think would be reasonable
The reason I really thought about it was...
What's your standard offer?
No, the reason I really thought about it was, I thought $300, what would that be worth today? Okay. That's the key. Because then I got thinking about J.J. Dillon, and he's always walking around with the 10 grand. Mm-hmm. So then I really got thinking, and I got one on the inflation calendar.
I see.
Or the calculator. And basically, J.J. Dillon's $10,000 would be the equivalent of $22,000 today.
I was going to guess between 20 and 25.
And I bring it up because J.J. made the comment that it doesn't matter if you're a doctor or a lawyer, $10,000 is nothing to scoff at. And I was thinking about Pretty Woman, and this guy's a billionaire, and he's bartering over $4,000. Is it true, JJ? Is it true that $10,000 in 1987 was nothing to scoff at? And I did the math, and I thought, $22,000. If you're a doctor or lawyer, it's probably nothing to scoff at 22 grand. These are things that went through my head here today.
Well, if I'm going to be honest, this discussion was probably more entertaining than the actual episode of television we watched.
I'm just trying to stall for time because there wasn't a lot to say about this show.
This is maybe a 10-minute show. Yes, of course, they can't all be as great as last week, but I would hope for more than we got tonight. So Ivan Koloff and Vladimir Pietrov come out, And Vladimir stands there and looks mean as Ivan cuts a promo running down the superpowers. I believe he promised there would be another new Russian soon. Oh,
I can't wait.
all right. Jimmy Valiant versus Randy Barber.
I said, hey, Whitty, you want to come watch this match with me? I knew she'd love Jimmy Valiant. She declined. She should have, because she would have been watching the match for 2 seconds.
Here's everything that happened. Jimmy punched him. He punched him a second time. He hit the boogie elbow, and he won. He never took off his jacket.
He never took off his hat.
Never took off his hat.
Yeah. And it didn't even fall off.
Now, here's worse news. To fill time, since Jimmy had wrestled so short, we got a Tim Horner promo.
This Tim Horner. I make fun of some promos nowadays.
Whew.
What's funny about the shows we watch, these 80s shows, is the highs are much higher, but the lows really are much lower.
That is definitely true.
Yeah. The best promos on this show, like, nobody's touching them today.
No.
Nobody. But the worst promos on these shows, I mean, Dash is laughing at fucking Tim Horner as he stood there and cut just about the worst promo I think I've ever seen in my whole life watching wrestling.
It's been many years since I've seen one worse than this.
And I'm hoping against hope that Jimmy Valiant was not scheduled to do an interview here, but he saw young Tim Horner just dying out there, and he decided that he was going to go save the day.
So, Horner's dying. He's mumbling. He has no enthusiasm. He has no delivery. I'm not buying it. None of the fans are buying it. It's all very
What's there
terrible.
to buy?
Well, I don't know. But it's a disaster, and Boogie Woogie steps in to save the day. The charisma gulf between these two men, maybe the highest on any on-screen television pair of all time. Valiant is ranting about grandpas. It's National Grandpa's Day.
Yeah, this was the other reason I thought maybe he just stepped in and went into business for himself. Because Jimmy Valiant had nothing to say.
No.
Except that today was Grandparents' Day.
He liked his grandpa.
And he didn't even know how old his grandfather
He
was.
said, my grandfather was born in 1904. He's 94 years old today. Here on this show, recorded in 1988.
Yeah.
And he talked about Tim Horner's grandpa. And then he kissed him. And if I'm being honest, Tim Horner did not seem to be resisting this kiss all that much.
Well, it was funny because...
He may have enjoyed it a little bit.
Well, I think it's possible Tim Horner didn't know it was coming because Jimmy Valiant went into business for himself.
I'm guarantee you didn't know it was coming.
Jimmy grabs him, and he looks at him, and he's just about to kiss him on the lips, but then he stops for a second as if he's thinking, nah. And then he just kisses him.
Yeah.
He changed his mind again, and away he went. I'll never forget the day that we had a show in The Dalles, Oregon.
Ah, yes.
Now, why it's called The Dalles, I don't know. That's a stupid name, but that's what it's called. That's the name of the town.
Yes.
The Dalles.
Yes.
Not Dalles, Oregon. The Dalles. There's way the fuck down there. It's at least a 3.5, 4 hour drive.
Well, more than that. It's 3 hours to Portland and then like 2 hours east along the gorge.
It can't be that far.
I think it was. I'll look it up.
Look it up. I think I'd say it's a good 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours. So we drive all the way to the Dalles, and we do the show in the middle of nowhere, and it's me and Buddy against...
Me and Richie.
Was it you and Richie?
That's the only main event I ever did.
Really?
No, that's not true. I did one with you and Tim and somebody. But anyway, go ahead.
So we dragged your ass into the main event here in the Dalles, and we did a tag match, and Buddy was doing a flamboyant gimmick at the time. Just put it that way. And at the end of the match, I think we won. Can't remember. But everybody's booing like crazy, and Buddy's egging him on.
It's a 4 hour drive for the Dalles.
They're calling him very, very inflammatory names. And so Buddy grabs me, and he just kisses me right on the lips. I was like, all right. That was weird. He smelled like mouthwash.
Good.
I'll never forget that. And he was very hairy.
That's
like
bad.
Yeah, it was weird. I'll admit it was weird.
It's okay to say it was weird.
It was a little weird.
Yeah.
I was not expecting Buddy to kiss me on the lips and
In the
at the
ring.
end of this match. So anyway, I was like, oh, well, what the hell? That was fun. So we're leaving the ring, and I look out, and there's John DeCourcy and Katie
Really?
DeCourcy,
I did not know they were there.
who worked with me at Cascade Elite Gymnastics at the time. I don't think had ever come to a wrestling match before.
And they went to the Dalles?
Yes. That's the craziest part.
Yes, it is, actually.
So if I thought it was weird, they really thought it was weird. They didn't know what to make of this.
Yeah.
That was like, of all of the...
I never knew that detail until right now.
Yeah.
Well, all of this is more interesting than Brad Armstrong. Brad comes out for a promo. He's upset about the Horsemen. He challenged Ric Flair to a one-on-one match. And they went to another TV show where Armstrong was cutting a promo when Ric Flair interrupted. He shakes Armstrong's hand and says, "You've got a lot of respect for you, but I'm the world champion, and this is my interview now. You should leave." And Armstrong's just standing there. He doesn't leave. And Flair ignores him and goes off on his promo about Dusty and Nikita, whatever he's got to say.
Before you go any further on this, I just want to remind everybody of the segment on Raw Monday where you had Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, babyfaces, along with Sami Zayn, also a babyface, and what happened in that little segment. And then we'll talk about this one here.
All right, so Flair's cutting this promo on Dusty and Nikita. And finally, Armstrong interrupts and says, "Hey, this is my interview time. They asked me to be out here. And I'll be the first to admit I can't go word for word with you here on this set, but if we get in that ring, I can go move for move for you, so let's go have a match." Flair totally ignores him. He just keeps talking about Nikita and Dusty. Armstrong's danger's getting up. His fists are on his hips, his elbows are sticking out, his head is all bent over, and suddenly the four horsemen just say, "Well, let's cut to the chase." And they run out and they beat the crap out of him. And it's a 4-on-1 beatdown, and they drop his leg across a chair. And the Rock and Rolls and Dusty and Barry Windham all arrive to chase him away.
This was like so awesome. I just thought of Sami Zayn, and granted, it was a babyface and two other babyfaces. But man, he's just, first off, he's the worst babyface you've ever seen. You want to punch him, Sami Zayn.
Yeah.
And then the other two babyfaces just treat him like an absolute nothing geek and walk off on him. And he just stands there like a sad puppy dog.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, who could possibly ever cheer for this guy? And then you've got this segment where the story is Brad had interview time, and this fucker, Ric Flair, decided to go in and just walk all over him because he's a star, and he doesn't think that Brad is a star. Mm-hmm. And instead of just taking it, Brad's like, "Dude, this is my time, so get the hell out of here." Flair's response is to ignore him because he's a jabroni, but fucking Brad ain't taking it, and he stands up for himself.
Yes.
And finally, it takes 4 dudes to run in and beat him up.
Yeah.
It was so good. It was so good. Like, you so got behind Brad Armstrong. And trust me, on this show, I don't get behind Brad Armstrong a lot.
No. We would not later.
Oh, my God.
Still the wackiest team of all time, Dick Murdoch and Baron Von Raschke versus Brody, Chase, and Larry Stevens. Another week, another geek who has no idea what to do with his free arm when he's taking a brainbuster. It's Larry Stevens, and Murdoch lifts him up with his brainbuster, and he's hanging up there, and Stevens' arm is just hanging loose, pointing down at the mat. And 2 or 3 seconds go by, and he says, "Well, maybe I should hold my arm out to the side and chicken wing it." So he does this, and then Murdoch drops him on his head.
I got a question, though. Where do you put your arm, Vinny?
Put it on the guy's hip, push yourself up.
No, but once you're in the air, then what do you do with it?
Same spot.
When you're just hanging
Listen,
out.
I guarantee you, if I go back and watch 10 million delayed Davey Boy Smith suplexes, I will never see a guy not know what to do with his arm. It'll be somewhere.
Well, I'm just thinking because you think of all those suplexes where you hold the guy up and he is like, he's just straightening his legs perfectly straight, upside down. And it's like, okay, if someone was suplexing you in real life, why would you do that? And the alternative is to do what Mr. Kennedy did and kick his legs and swing his arms and then make the move impossible to execute.
Yes.
It's just a weird move to hold a man up there like that, upside down.
Did you ever see Blade 2?
Are you kidding me?
Well,
What
it's
a
relevant.
stupid question.
It's a fun movie. But there's a scene at the end where it's Blade kicking ass against guys. They may have been vampires. I forget that part. But he's using round kicks and punches and throws, and it's all very cool. And then the last guy, he grabs him and does a delayed vertical suplex. It's so lame. This awesome fight scene, and then that move at the end.
I don't vote to retire it, but there's so many cool suplexes today that the delayed suplex, I don't know. I'm overthinking this because there's nothing else to talk about here on this show.
We are struggling.
It's just this ain't cheerleading. You know what I mean?
No.
Well, you
want to clap?
No, but like, it's ridiculous to straighten your legs. I never in my life, when taking a standing delayed suplex, I never put my legs together and straightened them. That was too ridiculous. That was too gymnasticsy. I didn't kick them, but I had them bent just a little bit, and I had them apart just a little bit. Like, oh man, I'm up here in the air. Oh, now I'm going down. And I had many delayed suplexes by Sonny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
I don't know. You got to talk about something. It's a radio show.
It really is. So they cut a promo about winning the Crockett Cup, and I'm watching there. And so here's another question about these two. Have you ever seen what was supposed to be a star tag team with two worse physiques than this? We've talked about Murdoch's before. Skinny arms, skinny legs, pot gut. Baron had the, aging wrestler gimmick.
What about the headhunters? Does that not count? Because they're just
different kind of. Because they're spectacularly fat.
Yes.
Murdoch just has skinny arms and legs and a big gut. Baron had the old wrestler physique where it looks like he's starting to melt. And he was also hairy.
I don't think he was very old either.
Probably not. I don't know how old.
I'll bet mid-40s.
Yeah.
We actually talked about it on the show, which is, watch me be totally wrong.
We talked about Baron's age on the show?
Yeah. Baron von Raschke was born in 1940.
So he would have been 48.
So he'd been 47.
Oh, yeah, 47. God damn it.
He looked a lot older than that.
Yeah, and
he's got that Ultimo Guerrero thing going on.
If you were to rank physiques in the show, he would be lower than Rick Rude and Lex Luger. And Dick Murdoch and, well, not Dusty. I guess Dusty and Dick Murdoch were a team for a while, too.
That's another one.
They probably were not a treat on the eyes. Tully Blanchard versus Zane Smith.
Here's the thing with this match. There's not much to talk about. Zane Smith was extremely bad. Tully is a great worker, and even he could barely squash this guy effectively. Slingshot suplex. The only thing I wanted to mention was, I don't watch a lot of baseball, but every now and then you'll see like a world-famous baseball call on some documentary or radio program or whatever.
Okay.
Maybe some famous guy passes away. Tony Schiavone was a baseball announcer, and he went all baseball announcer during this match. If you go back and listen to how he called like the last 30 seconds of this match, It was like he was calling the World Series. Huh. He was actually really, really good. I was like, how the hell did you get that out of this, dude? You are a professional.
As good as he was, it was in this match that I realized this was an all Tony show with no David Crockett. And that made me sad. Because David Crockett, when you have nothing but squash matches for 2 hours, you need a guy who gets overly excited about squash matches. And Tony did his best, but he needs David Crockett.
I mean, I don't want to get on Michael Cole or anything, but if you'd put this match on Raw, you would have had to prod Michael Cole to wake him up. And Tony Schiavone's here just out of control.
He won with the slingshot suplex till he did. So Barry comes out for a promo. And before he can even say anything, they say, let's go to the finish of your match with Ric Flair. And when they say the finish, they mean like the last 15 plus minutes. This quote-unquote clip went through a commercial break.
Hey, that's fine with me.
Yeah, it was great. I'm not complaining. It's just odd. So Barry hits the lariat once, but Flair gets a foot on the ropes. 5 or 6 minutes go by. He gets it again, but Flair is able to roll to the apron to avoid being pinned. Dusty Rhodes was on commentary. He notes the building is so crazy, people are standing on their kids.
I miss Dusty on commentary.
And with about 10 seconds left, Barry hits a third lariat. But by the time he's able to crawl over and make the cover, the time limit has expired and the match ends in a draw. And so Wyndham cuts a promo vowing that he's going to be world champion someday soon. And he lays the belt across Flair's prone body because Flair is still so beaten and exhausted he can't even get up.
You know what's funny is we watch some of these matches where the crowd is screaming so loud that you're afraid something's going wrong, like your TV's going to melt like Baron von Raschke. We didn't have that in this match. I mean, the fans were super into it, but it was almost disappointing that they weren't screaming so loud that you thought your TV was going to melt.
We have heard bigger reactions.
Now, what I thought was interesting was they're calling the time. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing is, they called the time a lot more often back then. Nowadays, if you're doing a 30-minute match and you start calling the time, everyone knows it's going to a draw.
Oh, sure, yeah.
90% of the time.
Yeah.
They're doing the time calls during this match, and pretty soon they're announcing there's 5 minutes left. And if it were 2017, in most promotions, you would hear that there's 5 minutes left, and you would know for sure it's going to a draw, which this match did. Not these fans. These fans are like, man, he's going to pull it off in the last 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. They were into every single one of the near falls. These time calls did not dissuade them one bit from their interest in this match.
So then we got Bob Caudle interviewing.
Actually, before that, there's one other notable thing. Barry hits the lariat, and the ref counts 1, the ref counts 2, the bell rings. Time limit's expired. Barry's right there. He knows the referee didn't count 3, but the fans are cheering so loud that he sold it like a part of him believed he was the champion. And he stood up, and he grabbed the belt, but he had a look on his face of concern. Like, I'm holding this right now, but I just know something's going wrong. And sure enough, they announced it was a time limit draw, and man, he was sad.
The other thing to note here is that Flair, at one point, he had a body press off the top rope, but Wyndham rolled through and made a cover. It was a near fall, and for the record, I will acknowledge that Ric Flair was looking at the referee. Just to be fair.
Does happen sometimes.
Just to be fair. All right, so then we get Bob Caudle interviewing Flair and the Horseman. Flair is very, very happy now. He's recovered and caught his breath. He says the bottom line is...
Keep that in mind, by the way.
Yeah, I've taken so much note of that over the past 2 weeks. Flair explains the bottom line is he has the belt. That makes him the winner. And you, Barry Windham, are the loser. He's gleeful about all this.
Now, speaking of the World Series and Tony's call, Flair here, who just got taken to the limit and would not be the champion had that bell not rang, Flair's in the locker room 10 minutes later, and he is celebrating like he has won the World Series.
Yes.
You've never seen a happier man. He's not talking about how he escaped by the skin of his teeth or anything like that.
Yeah.
In his mind, he definitively beat this man.
Absolutely.
This man should not get another championship match. Mm-hmm. He's the winner. That guy's a loser.
Barry's the loser.
It was so great.
He's the winner. Barry's the loser. He says, I got 50 women outside my locker room. Wyndham, you are all alone in the loser's locker room. The Horsemen are all happy. So then we go back to the Peachtree Studios, where Schiavone finally interviews Wyndham, who apparently had just been standing around for this whole half-hour time frame. And basically all he said was that someday he would be world champ.
Flair's days as champion are numbered.
Mm-hmm. J.J. Dillon, Tully Blanchard, and Arn Anderson came out for a promo. Notable is that all the Horsemen were on this show talking, except Ole. So Dillon says Flair is the cornerstone of the Horsemen as the World Heavyweight Champion. And the Arn Andersons are the best tag team in the world, whether they have the belts or not. And as for Tully Blanchard, besides being the World Television Champion, he is also the only guy who is man enough to put $10,000 of his own money at stake in every match.
$22,000 today.
Yeah. And Tully is talking about how great the Horsemen are, and Dillon repeats their claim. If you've never seen the show, where they're doing these promos, they're about 15 feet away from the ring. And so Dillon looks up to the ring, and in the ring we see Lex Luger watching this promo intently, and Dillon just says, we are still not looking to expand. The Horsemen leave. So we get Lex Luger versus Randy Mulkey.
All right, I'm going to let you go into the details in a moment, but the overall story of this match is Luger has a match that goes maybe 2 minutes.
Very charitable.
He goes back to the booth, and he is gasping for air. He can barely breathe as he attempts to cut his promo. Now, this happened last week. So, he's gasping, he's wheezing, and finally out comes Barry Windham. Barry Windham now does a long promo talking about Luger and the Horsemen and making mistakes. He agrees not to come out again, etc., etc. So he does this whole spiel, and they go back to Luger for his comment, and he's still fucking blown up.
Yeah.
Ric Flair went a half hour with Barry Windham. And listen, it is not an exaggeration when Flair talks about going on that Stairmaster for 60 minutes and going in the ring and going all out and trying to blow up his opponent. Him and Barry were going at a fast clip.
Absolutely.
They got done with that match and they were back to normal quick. This goddamn Luger went 2 minutes. He couldn't breathe for an hour afterwards. He was so tired.
It's astonishing.
It's mind-blowing.
How? Because he's clearly fit. Clearly he's put a lot of time and effort in his body.
No.
Never been on a bike. Never been on a treadmill.
He does a lot of weightlifting.
Clearly short sets.
He does short sets, heavy weight,
Yes.
no cardio.
Zero.
And that's what happens when then you go in and do aerobic activity.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of blood to feed them muscles.
I mean, I've seen a lot
of air.
I've seen a lot of wrestlers of a lot of quality on a lot of shows. I've seen a lot of out-of-shape guys do matches and then do promos, and none of them are struggling like this.
No, I don't actually, honest to God, think I've ever seen anyone get so tired after such a short match and still be so tired 5 minutes into an interview segment.
So, as for the match, the highlight is Lex does a clean break on the very first lockup, pushes him to the corner, and he raises his hands in the air and takes a few steps backwards, and Randy Mulkey's eyes drift to Lex's chiseled abs, and he knows he is doomed. You can just see the life fade out of his face.
Because before that, he thought, I can get this guy.
But then he saw
I
abs.
can catch him. Oh, no, he does crunches. Now I'm fucked.
So then they did another clean break, but Randy tried a cheap shot because he knew he couldn't defeat a man with abs like this fair and square. Well, it turns out he can't defeat him with cheap shots either, and Lex killed him and power slammed him and put him in the rack and won. And then we have the interview segment where Lex is... He was able to get it out, but it was a struggle. Talking about how his phone's blowing up, much like himself. Not just with wrestling promoters, but Hollywood types. He was sure to say that he is already a rich man and he's always made great money, but he wants more. He wants the Horsemen and their lifestyle. And Barry comes out. How many times have we seen two guys get in a fight on Raw, and the same two guys come out the next week in the opening segment on Raw, and there's no explanation for why they have not spoken in 7 days since?
All the time.
First thing Barry says is, I've been calling you every day, leaving messages on your phone, and you refuse to call me back. It's not hard. So Lex says it's very rude of Barry to keep interrupting his interviews. He's done it twice now. He's going to let it slide because they had been friends before, but he would not let it slide if it happened again. And Barry says, all right, Lex, I won't interrupt your promos anymore, but I'll let you know, if you join the Horsemen, then someday you're going to be looking across the ring at me. And he leaves, and Lex shakes his head and says, someday Barry will grow up, and he'll learn about financial responsibilities and payments.
So they made it very clear, Lex Luger is not a babyface.
No. He is selfish and motivated by money.
Yeah.
Greed is good for Lex Luger here in the 80s. The Road Warriors cut a promo. Animal challenges the Horsemen to face them in 6-man tags with Dusty, or in 8-man tags with Dusty and Nikita.
I finally figured out who Hawk is. He's Tito Ortiz. If you've been watching any of the build-up for the Tito Ortiz fight that took place last night on Bellator, Tito's interviews are so mind-blowingly bad.
Really?
And they're exactly like Hawk's. Like, he's got all of these funny, clever things that he says, and you're like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? This shit's horrible. That was Hawk in this promo. Animal just sounded mad.
Hawk, first he buries Lex for being concerned about financial security. If that's what's motivating you when you wrestle us, all you'd be concerned about is a pine box. And then he starts to talk about slugs again. He even says, this is what I've been talking about a lot lately. Everyone we wrestle is a slug from Slug City. And he leaves. And Hillary's about to go with them. And Tony says, Paul, before you go. And he presents him with a commemorative edition of the Starrcade videotape.
The Starrcade 1986 video cassette.
I was hoping it would be... Remember when you go... VHS tapes were pretty big anyway. But when you went to rent them, they were in like a suitcase. This huge plastic box.
That's what this was in.
Was it one of those?
Yep.
I didn't recognize it at first.
I recognized it immediately because I thought, man, I remember back in the day, I'd go to the video store, and they'd have all these video cassettes, and it was like a library. Mm-hmm. If you guys have ever been to a library, those of you that know what libraries are still, or bookstores, if you've got a bookstore in your town. And by the way, there's a new bookstore. I swear to God, there's a new bookstore opening up at Redmond. You know what it's called?
No.
Brick and Mortar.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it was like a bookstore, so they had all these shelves, and all of the VHS tapes were on the shelves in these fancy, big plastic cases that had like a fancy... It was like a hardcover book with the insert to have the fancy cover on it. And you open it, you snapped it open, there's a big-ass fucking videotape in there. Man, oh man. Brought back memories.
Most of it was cheesy horror. I would always... Not like we had, that many video stores around, but when I, as a child, had an opportunity to visit a video store, first thing I did was try to find the wrestling section. Some had none at all. Some had huge things. It was great.
I remember every Friday I used to go over to Granny's to spend the night, and my Uncle Terry, who lived with her son, he would go to the movie store every Friday night, and he would come home with a stack of movies that he was going to watch over the weekend. He worked. He was a working man. Mm-hmm. Worked all week, built them fences. And then Friday, it was time to grab his VHS video cassettes. He'd lay in bed like all day, all weekend, and just watch movies.
Cool.
Yeah. Then he introduced me to Cujo.
Oh.
I fucking never watched a movie again.
I was going to say.
And I hate dogs.
How'd that go?
Oh, it did not go well.
Yeah, that's a bad parenting.
Ruined me.
Bad parenting move by your uncle.
He wasn't a parent.
Well, there you go. Probably just want to do it as a rib on your mom.
Took 6 weeks to produce this VHS tape of Starrcade in 1996.
Something else I was going to say with the video store, and I forget now.
All the porn you used to rent on those
Not at that, no.
VHS tapes?
Not at that age. No, there was a point in time when my family would actually not just rent movies, we would rent a VCR.
Wow.
They were too expensive to actually buy one of your own.
That's way back in the day.
And my dad rented a VCR, and we went over to whoever had the biggest house with the biggest TV, and we watched Raiders of the Lost Ark. And aunts, uncles, cousins, there was probably 30 people crowding around watching this movie on a TV.
So that was different because I had a buddy named Chris Johansson who had a video cassette recorder. He had a movie camera, a VHS movie camera.
Sure, yeah.
In the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This thing, you think about the whole TV truck nowadays, that's the size of this camera.
Yeah.
You'd pop it in there. You had to get a white piece of paper to white balance it before you filmed anything. Yeah. Oh, my God. It was so ghetto. And the thing probably cost like $3,000
It probably cost
crazy.
more than you would get for pinning Tully Blanchard.
Which was $6,000 in today's money.
Yes. So Ellering talks about how great this video is and all the great matches, Flair and Nikita, and
hey, on the subject of porn,
rock and roll and the Andersons. Yes.
all of these video stores, not all of them, but some of them actually had the porn area.
Yeah.
And it was like a different area of the store.
You usually have the old,
behind a wall,
the Old West saloon doors.
Yeah,
get back there. Yeah.
And so you had to like walk in there if you were going to get something.
Yes.
Which of course I never did. I just looked at all the creeps going in and out. You had to actually walk in there and walk out of there in front of everybody.
Yes.
Like, could they have made it any more humiliating? It's like, Jesus.
You're still scarred,
Christ.
I see.
No, I'm not scarred. I never did it. I just had to watch these poor bastards go in there. They just put their hat down or something like that. They'd always do something to not be seen, but by doing it,
it is true.
They were even more. You know what I mean? They'd stick out.
The stigma about pornography has gone way, way down since everyone can get on their phone.
Back then, these guys would come in, and they were going to go to the porn area. And so it's like, well, I don't want to be seen. And so they ended up dressing like the Undertaker in his entrance.
Basically.
They'd have a big fucking trench coat and a giant hat pulled down over their head.
No eye contact.
Thinking like, man, nobody will recognize me. And it's like, you're the only guy anyone's looking at in here. You fucking look like you're walking into an Old West saloon going through those doors right there to grab your porn VHS.
Mm-hmm. Which would then be returned the next day no more than 20 minutes into the movie.
Of course.
Yeah. Where in the hell were we? Oh,
well, it ain't going to top that, so we may as well just give up.
Anyway, yeah, he said, buy this video. This is actually important. The best thing in this video, of course, is knocking Jim Cornette off the scaffold. That comes up later.
I'll tell you where we were, and it was not better than porn. Gary Royal and Brad Armstrong.
This may have been obscene in a different way. Brad Armstrong is the clean-cut, scientific wrestling babyface, brought up in the business, a man who respects this sport and its tradition. And this match was so fucking boring. He's got the guy in an arm bar, and you actually hear the fan cry out, "Come on, Brad, get it over with!" Brad refused. And the match went like 7 or 8 more minutes of arm bars. And finally, they blow the finish and Brad wins.
That's exactly what happens.
It's very bad. Not even funny bad, like Vladimir Pietrov. Just bad.
What's funny is he never lost the crowd. I don't even know how.
Except that one guy. But yes, they were cheering for him, by and large.
All right, let's talk about the main event of the show.
Main event of my life.
So the Rock and Roll Express is doing an interview, sporting their mullets, I might add. And they say, we've got a special guest here tonight. His name is David Allan Coe. And they bring out David Allan Coe. And David Allan Coe, I guess the only way to describe this is he outdid on this wrestling show every wrestler ever with his mullet. Let me explain some science to you, Vinny.
All right.
I did some investigations. The human hair goes through 3 growth cycles.
I see.
There's the anagen, the catagen, and the telogen phases.
Of course.
So, your hair grows anywhere from 1.25 centimeters to a ½ inch per month. The latter of which is, in my case, that's about 6 inches a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now there's more. The growth phase can last anywhere from 2 to 6 years. Now, after this growth phase ends, there is a catagen phase where the hair stops growing, and then there is the telogen phase. This is the dormancy, and then the hair falls out. You got all that?
Yes.
The point of this is your hair should grow at the most 6 inches per year for at most 6 years.
Okay, so that should be 3 feet.
That's 3 feet.
Yeah.
This fucking David Allan Coe, his mullet, he had a normal mullet on top, but the back, as God is my witness, went down to his knees. That's way more than 3 feet.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't think that it was actually possible to legitimately grow your hair this long. I presume it was real, right?
As far as I know.
Maybe that's a question for Google. This was the most amazing mullet I've ever seen in my entire life.
It was 2 inches of growth on the top, about 1.5 inches on the sides. It wasn't like a shaved sides mullet or anything, but yes, from the back of his head, his hair grew down to his knees. I'm looking at pictures of Crystal Gale, who also had famously long hair. I believe hers may actually be a little bit longer, but it's not a mullet. She just has long hair.
Yes. This was, by design, a mullet that he had.
And he comes out, and he talks about how he's great friends with Dusty Rhodes. He knows Ric Flair's in trouble, and one of these days, Dusty's going to get him. And he stops, and there's a pause, and Ricky says, "Tell him about your concert." And David says, "Oh, yeah." And he plugs his concert that night and where he'll be.
Okay, so I'm looking online, and there's a lot of pictures of David Allan Coe. And I'm sure somebody will alert us immediately, but it appears to me that either that had to be fake or that was the longest it has ever been in his whole entire life. Because he's got some long hair in some of these pictures, but nothing even approaching the length of, I guess there's one album he's got here. Son of the South, which actually is the best you'll find if you have not seen the actual show. Seriously, it's the most astonishing mullet of all time. He put all of the wrestlers to shame. I had pity for all the wrestlers after I saw David Allan Coe.
The collective blow to their self-esteem.
Oh,
I hope they recovered. Let's see. I talked about that. Superpowers came out for a promo. Very next segment after the commercial. Nikita runs down Vladimir Pietrov. Dusty plugs a match against the Russians in the Omni on February 1st. And it says, we back down from no men. Now, if you excuse me, I want to go hang out with David Allen Coe. He goes backstage. Rock and Roll Express versus Eddie Roberts and David Isley. This went too long. I do not need 5+ minutes of the Rock and Roll Express working over David Isley's leg, or Roberts, whichever it was. Finally, they pinned him with a double dropkick. Here we go. Short turnaround. Bill Dundee and Jimmy Garvin came out for a promo. Dundee goes first, and he's sure to mention that he is still the Central States champion. He knows there's a lot of great wrestlers and a lot of great competitors in the Central States area. Big towns like Evansville, which is actually a city he plugged here on this nationwide show. He promised they were going to take one of Jimmy Crockett's jets. Another one, Jimmy Garvin was sure to point out, because he's got so many. They're going to take one of Jimmy Crockett's private jets, fly back to
Honest to God, I think he had 2 jets. Well, if I recall correctly.
There you go, then. Fly back to the Central States, pick up all those great wrestlers, and bring them back here on TV. And he goes, and he's really good. It's a good promo. But then, Jimmy Garvin goes off. He roars like Braun Strowman, first of all. A pretty Braun Strowman. He roars and hollers and says, they had to keep me tied up in the back, so I wouldn't come out here and I wouldn't smack Dusty Rhodes. I wouldn't come out here, I wouldn't smack Barry Windham. I wouldn't come out here and I wouldn't smack the Rock and Rolls. But it doesn't matter now. You know, where's 1987? 1987 is going to be a great year for gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. And so is 1988, and 1989, and 90 and 91, because I get better looking every day. And he goes off about how great he is, how great his life is, and I don't even remember who he called out. It doesn't matter. And he finally is done. He says, you know what, Tony, I've decided you're not such a bad guy. Precious, give him just a little peck on the cheek. Precious gives him a little peck on the cheek, and Tony's thrilled. And Dundee says, you know what, let's make everyone jealous. Everyone at home watch this. Jimmy, give Precious a kiss. And Jimmy kissed his wife like she was his wife. I love Jimmy Garvin so much.
He's amazing.
As long as he doesn't wrestle.
It's funny because he's always a heel, but he seems like such a natural babyface.
He's so enthusiastic. There's a turn coming. I'm not sure exactly when. Sooner than later, I think. But he's awesome. He is so awesome. Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez versus Tommy Angel and Chance McQuaid.
I'd love to take over. First off, this music they have for Rick Rude is so awesome. Like, they need to give that music to somebody today.
This is the one case of dubbing over music and improving it.
Yes. It is unbelievably
as great as Smooth Operator was, this
is way better.
This lounge porno music that you hear behind the western doors of the video store.
That's right. That's where they got it. So I'm watching this match, and Chance McQuaid is in the ring. Which sounds like some gimmick Chris Jericho would use in some band.
Chance McQuaid, it does.
So he's in there, and this fucking guy cannot do a thing. And he showed up at the building with the exact same gear as Manny Fernandez.
That's a solid point. 2 men in there in blue trunks, blue knee pads, and white boots.
What a jobber. So he's in there, and he's so unbelievably bad. And if somebody would have said to me, Brian, as bad as this is, in a moment, Tommy Angel is going to tag in, and he is going to be worse than Chance McQuaid, I would have said, that, my friend, is impossible. There's no way that anybody on this show could be worse than Chance McQuaid. Well, fucking Tommy Angel, and it is Tommy Angel. They had it listed as Tommy Angle on the show last week.
Yes, they did.
Tommy Angel tags in, and he is so fucking impossibly bad. Like, he's so bad. Mind-numbingly bad. And Rude does, like, a spot with him and is like, I'm done with this shit. And they DDT the guy and pin him.
Even that's glossing over it. They tried, like, to hit a double knee first. It went horribly awry, and then Rick Rude just threw up his hands and said, fuck this! And he grabbed the guy and spiked him and pinned him. What is next? So they immediately went to join Tony Schiavone for a promo. Did you note, Brian, that after wrestling for 5 minutes here, granted tagging out in and out, but still 5 minutes, neither man was blown up?
It's crazy.
They spoke just fine.
Yeah.
So, Rude, Paul Jones just runs down everybody. Rude says Ricky Morton has a voice like a songbird. A voice like a songbird. But he's not a champion. The Road Warriors are just jealous because they don't have championships either. Manny calls out the same two teams and he quotes Bon Jovi. You've been shot through the heart and we're to blame because we give rock and roll a bad name. Yeah.
It was a great promo.
That was awesome. Vladimir Pietrov versus Alan Martin. This is the best Vladimir Pietrov match I've ever seen.
He was way better than Tommy Angel. I'll give you that much.
He threw the worst strikes since the last time I watched him wrestle, but then he got the backbreaker right, and he won with the flying Russian hammer and didn't destroy anything. Then Ivan cut a promo on his behalf. Perhaps he was too blown up to speak. I don't know. He promised they would take out Dusty Rhodes and any other American who stepped into the ring with them to send a message to Nikita, and eventually they would take over, or they would end Nikita's career. Jim Cornette comes out for a promo and he's pissed. He is very upset that this Starcaders videotape is being sold on the idea that you can see the spot where he was hospitalized.
This is one of those great heel promos where it was designed to make you buy the tape.
Yeah, yes.
And it did a great job with it.
Absolutely he did. And everyone who would buy a tape like this is sick. This led to the Midnight Express and Big Bubba versus Denny Brown and Bill Mulkey and George South.
A couple of things about my man Dennis Condrey. First off, he so reminds me of Richie Magnet. Because Richie was exactly like Dennis Condrey. He wore the same bandana.
He did.
Had that same gimmick.
Yeah.
He was a quiet one who never did the promos.
Also true.
He just went in there and beat dudes up. He was Dennis Condrey.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when me and Buddy and Richie were a six-man trio.
And you all had bandanas.
I guess I was Big Bubba.
That's true.
Because I don't know who else I would have been.
Strange twist. You somehow ended up as Big Bubba.
I was Big Bubba in that crew.
Because we had our Dennis Condrey, and Buddy was very much like Bobby Eaton.
Clearly
clone.
Bobby Eaton, yeah. That left me as Big Bubba.
It does, by default.
Yeah. I had a great run with Hogan, though. At least I got that out of it. Condrey's nickname, I've known this forever, but it really hit me today that he is the lover boy.
Lover boy, Dennis Condrey.
I don't know why it hit me like a ton of bricks today. I guess because I just figured heel team, they have gimmick names, Beautiful Bobby, Loverboy Dennis. But it really hit me today that his gimmick is he's a lover boy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, when he's in town, watch out, ladies, here comes Dennis Condrey.
It's because during these promo segments that we've been watching for the past year plus, he usually just stands in the background and just lets Jim Cornette control the show. But as noted, his time here is coming to an end shortly. He is long past the stage of giving a fuck, and so he's just doing whatever to entertain himself. Last week, he was making faces and then ate the format. This week, he was making faces and then just randomly began to bark like a dog. You don't care.
Bubba killed Mulkey with a sit-out powerbomb.
Let's not... That's not what it was.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be.
Are you sure?
I think it was supposed to be a Liger bomb.
They did like a backdrop, the Express double backdrop the Mulkey, and Bubba caught him. Just, frankly, exactly like Ultimo Guerrero caught Volador, only less impressive because Bubba had a 200-pound weight edge. And Bubba's holding him, and he's got him by the waist, hanging upside down, and he turns around to face the hard camera. And instead of herking him up into powerbomb position, he just jumps and sits down, and if the Mulkey tucked his head so he came down on the back of his neck, which is still very bad. But he did not come down like a pile driver, and he did not come down like a powerbomb. He came down on the back of his neck and was done. And Cornette says this is the Bubba spike. And based on the angle in which the Mulkey hit the mat, I believe that's what he was trying to do. Drop him this way. Incredibly dangerous. And in fact, he didn't move. Bubba got the pin. All the other two jobbers and Dennis Condrey all dropped to a knee around the man to make sure he was still breathing in and out. So they go over to the podium. They're cutting their promo. This is where Condrey began to bark like a dog. And they cut to the ring where Bill Mulkey is not moved. And finally they say, got to get him over to the apron. I guess the doctor can't get in the ring for whatever. Let's get him over there. So they have four guys. Each guy grabs an arm or a leg, and they just lift his body over, move it 5 feet, and drop him.
Don't think that's how you're supposed to handle these
Pretty sure that's not how it goes.
injuries, but
I guess they just wanted him to die there instead of dying in the ring.
It was the highlight of the show, with Cornette ranting and raving, Dennis Condrey making faces and barking, and a quick cut to show them carting out this poor Mulkey.
It was like a tiger driver, only he had him by the waist, not the arms.
It's bad.
Let's see. Yeah, Cornette ranted and said the Windham and Garvin needed to give them a U.S. tag title shot. And that was that. And the last match, the main event of the evening, Arn Anderson versus Bill Tabb. He was William for 1 week.
Now he's back to good old Bill.
This is Bill again, and he went out and got himself the Barbarian haircut, too. Arn pinned him with a spine buster in about a minute. And finally, Lex Luger comes back out. He's wearing a button-up shirt, a too-loose tie, and a white sweater over this. He says his opponents are nervous and defeated before the match even began just by looking at him, and he would be boosted even further by being a horseman, and that will happen someday.
I can't believe that of all people, you understated the sweater to this degree. This fucking sweater this guy was wearing. He had like a button-up shirt and a tie, and this white sweater.
Yeah. He was very preppy.
What in the fuck was this?
I don't know.
A giant white sweater on Lex Luger. Over like a button-up shirt and a tie.
Yes, he was layered.
What? That was the most newsworthy thing on the whole show.
Well, it was the 80s.
It was hideous. Just hideous. And that's how the show ended. With that display of fashion by Lex Luger. Covering up his physique.
Yes.
With a white sweater.
Well, that was the show, everyone.
He looked like that abominable snowman on Hoth.
The Wampa.
He looked like a Wampa. That's what he looked like. All right, everybody. I don't know how we spent an hour on that, but we did. So now, we're going to wrap it up.
And there will be gorilla shit all over the Omni.
All right, a better show. NWA Championship Wrestling.
This is the exact opposite. This is all character development.
There's nothing but character development.
And listen, with a few exceptions, the very top of the top in NXT, your Nakamura, Bobby Roode, these guys are awesome. But the worst person on NXT TV is better than every single one of these jobbers. The jobbers on this show are the most horrendous professional wrestlers that have ever walked the face of the earth. They are the absolute bottom of the barrel, dirt worst. And you know what? I think I figured out that one of the reasons, besides the fact that they worked so many dates and they worked with great people, but I think part of becoming a great worker is trying to figure out how to have a good match with a terrible person. And every week on TV, these guys come out here and they try to have a semblance of a match with the worst wrestlers in the world. It had to help them improve in some way. You learn to idiot-proof a match. You learn to work around weaknesses. You learn how to save a match when it fell apart, invariably.
Yes.
They all fall apart here.
So the show opened with a very short clip of a brawl between the Midnight Express and Barry Windham and Ron Garvin. David Crockett was back.
And he was so excited for tonight's action.
I haven't checked, but was David Crockett like a perennial worst announcer of the year in the 80s?
Yeah, and I don't know why.
What the hell was wrong with you people? And I'll be honest with you, I thought he was a geek as well. 12-year-old Vinny watching these shows was not into David Crockett. Little did I know how much this sport needs men like David Crockett to call wrestling matches, who get so excited about the littlest things. Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin versus George South. I don't know what was going on, but the crowd was laughing their asses off throughout this match.
Garvin is got to be turning babyface soon. Everybody's cheering for him. They're dancing to his music.
He's so awesome.
They're clapping.
Of course they are.
Like, there's plenty to hate about all of the heels on this show, except Jimmy Garvin.
He's just
what is there to hate about this guy?
He's so enjoyable.
He's a happy guy. He's always in a good mood.
He is.
He loves his wife.
Yes.
I mean,
he's a committed family
he's like
man.
Rusev.
We'll get to him. Oh, we'll get to him. In fact, that's actually a very good comparison when I think about it. Except Rusev is a much better wrestler. Anyway, Garvin kicked George South's ass from bell to bell. He won with a brainbuster. He goes to the podium. And he cut a babyface promo. Folks, what's going to follow here is the greatest 2 hours any of you have ever seen. Now, Tony Schiavone, I got to talk to you. Tell your mama to stop calling me late at night. I guess that's when she gets home. But tell her to stop calling me and find out who my next opponent's going to be. I don't know. I just show up and fight whoever they put in front of me. And this crowd's being silly. Silly, he said. They say they want Brad Armstrong. Brad Armstrong's not coming out. Bubba Bob's not coming out. Now I'm going to kiss my wife. And he kissed his wife, and they left.
He kissed his wife, and they got all hot and bothered and were forced to leave.
It was, they left.
They were about to start humping on national television.
They had intentions when they left. So of all people, Brad Armstrong's out there cutting a promo after the break and doesn't acknowledge Jimmy Garvin at all. No doubt afraid that Jimmy Garvin would whip his ass. Talks about the Horseman jumping in from behind. Tonight he's got a chance to beat Tully Blanchard and win $10,000. Ron Garvin versus Gary Royal.
You know, I realize we look back on these having lived through 30 years of the good, the bad, the ugly, and Vince Russo. But man, Garvin got in there and beat the shit out of this guy. And this ain't ballet. And I watched this match and I was like, make this dude the champion now. He's so awesome.
It's not just that he beat the crap out of him, although he did. But the way he set it up was he was doing pretty average wrestling stuff, maybe a chop or two. But then he would give Royal some punches, as in let Royal punch him a few times, and this would serve to fire him up, and then he'd chop the piss out of him and tie him in knots. Every time, if you go back and watch this, all the flurries of Garvin's most violent offense, it comes after he has given Royal some time, some offense.
David Crockett's going crazy. He's marking out for this beating. He's just like I was. He was a fan.
Yeah.
We're all fans. We're all David Crockett at heart.
So this goes like 3 minutes, and it's 3 minutes, about 2 minutes and 50 seconds is Garvin on offense. And he misses a corner charge, takes a big bump in the middle of the ring. And Gary Royal says, "This is my shot." He goes to the middle rope and flies off with his huge elbow, and of course it misses by a country mile, and Garvin punches him and wins. A complete and total squash that still told a story. This match was awesome.
Then we were exposed to the weakness of Ron Garvin.
He was not a complete package.
As he talked. It's a terrible promo.
He called them Jimmy Cornette, Dennis the Menace, whoever you are. He dared them to face himself and win them for the U.S. tag titles. Number 1, Paul Jones got a promo.
Here we are again. I don't want to harp on it, but I'm gonna. Paul Jones was the best. He cut a great promo here. They go to Rude. He cuts a great promo. They go to Ragin'. He cuts a great promo. And I'm looking at the act, and I thought, I don't give a shit if this was 1986, 1987, whatever. These men would be a top act in WWE today.
Oh, God, yes.
Like, they'd be the top tag team in the whole company today.
My, I can envision this. Yeah, how they blow everyone away. Rick Rude says, we're going to beat the dog out of all those other teams in the Crockett Cup and take a nice vacation with that $100,000. Well, somebody else said it was $1 million, I think, so he got that number wrong, but it didn't matter.
It was Cornette who said that the winners got $1 million.
Yeah. Well, Rude's going to be in for a happy surprise then when they win. It's 10 times what he thought it was. Tully Blanchard versus Brad Armstrong.
I don't want to sound like a dick, but everybody always talked about how great Brad Armstrong was, how they couldn't believe that nobody did more with Brad Armstrong. Now, granted, we've only been watching Brad Armstrong on these shows for a few months, maybe a year. He is so boring. Now, granted, with that said, he was really good here in this match. Because the story was, he had 10 minutes to win.
Yes.
So he couldn't do headlocks and lay on the mat for 5 minutes.
Right.
And then do an abdominal stretch.
Right.
And then lay in another headlock for 5 minutes. He had to go.
There was more action in these 10 minutes than in a month of 5-minute squashes.
Yes. And my favorite part is David Crockett, the fan in all of us. Mm-hmm. He is so impressed with Brad Armstrong's ingenious strategy, which is, you gotta go get him.
Yeah.
That's why he won Worst Announcer all those years in a row.
Well, there is that.
Now, granted, on Raw today, that's the same thing the announcers would say.
Mm-hmm.
This strategy is ingenious. There's a 10-minute time limit.
They'd be bored, though, when they said
and
it.
And he's going after him.
Yeah. So the story was, Armstrong was full speed ahead for all 10 minutes. Even when he got cut off, he was constantly trying to fight back, whereas Tully was flustered at the beginning. He was trying to bail. His dander got up, and he went after Armstrong, but that just fell in Armstrong's trap. Later in the match, as the time was running down, he actually tried to flee, but Armstrong ran him down, carried him back to the ring. He hit a missile dropkick, but Tully got an arm out of the ring for that one, and Armstrong sets him up for the leg sweep. Just then, the time expires. It was a very good Saturday afternoon match. Dick Murdoch comes out for a promo.
I got to say something about this. Captain Redneck is a big, happy, jolly redneck, and he's always in a great mood. He's always talking about his friends, always talking about the barbecues at his house. And his character is such that you're thinking, man, can I go watch the Royal Rumble at Dick Murdoch's house? Because it just sounds like the greatest time ever. Now, about 2 weeks ago, I didn't mention this at the time, because I thought nothing of it, but it's now been 3 straight weeks, and I did some investigation. About 3 weeks ago, he did a promo, Happy, Jolly, Redneck Dick Murdoch. But there was something that he said, and there was a way that he said it, and I was looking at the guy, and I thought, there's a bad man in there somewhere. Like, it was nothing overt. Probably, maybe nobody even noticed it besides me. But then it was there last week, and it was there again this week. And after 3 weeks of it, I was like, I gotta go find out when this fucking guy turns heel. Mm-hmm. He turns heel like any time now.
Okay.
This guy's so goddamn good. Like, it was the subtlety that you never ever see, because nobody's as good as Dick Murdoch. Dick Murdoch's out there cutting a babyface promo, but you can see behind his eyes that someone's about to get fucked up. And he's got some bad intentions, and this facade of being happy Captain Redneck's about to go right out the window. This guy needs to be in the Hall of Fame. What the hell's going on?
Well, at this point, the facade was still up. He says, what we just saw was one of the finest matches we'll ever see. Which isn't true, but it was nice to say. And then, talking about bad intentions, he's got a match coming up against Big Bubba, a Texas barbed wire match in Kansas City.
That don't sound right.
No. Hope everyone got out of that okay. Jimmy Valiant comes out for a promo. I'm not making up what he said here.
There was no point to this except that he was having a good time, and we needed to burn 3 minutes.
He thanked the fans for the cards and letters that they all sent in. But he can't read.
What were they sending the cards in for? I forget what happened.
Just how much they love him.
Oh.
Randomly. Well, nothing better to do on a Saturday afternoon than write a love letter to Jimmy Valiant. So he couldn't read, so he had Baron von Raschke read them. But Baron von Raschke could only read German. So, in conclusion, he asked all his fans, please send pictures instead. This is all true.
And then he said, if you ever see me at a live event, do not come up and shake my hand, because I'll kiss you. Yeah. That's how it ended.
Yes. Lex Luger versus Tommy Angel. J.J. Dillon was in Lex's corner now. I think this was Lex's third match on TV, maybe fourth.
This was so beyond terrible.
By far the worst one.
My immense vocabulary is too limited to describe this match.
It was really, really bad. He couldn't even do the torture rack right.
You want to know how bad it was? When it was over, I was begging to see Ric Flair versus Tommy Angel, because the story was that Ric Flair could carry a broom, and when this match was over, I cannot believe that Ric Flair could carry Tommy Angel. That's how bad this guy was.
So they go to the podium where, again, Lex is huffing and puffing, but thank God they at least had Dillon there to talk to him for 2 minutes and give him that much time to catch his breath. So JJ insists there's been no change. There will still be no expansion of the Horsemen. It is still Flair, Blanchard, and the Andersons. But a man like Lex Luger only comes along once in a lifetime. Can't let this opportunity pass him by. He is officially a Horseman, and there is room in the limo for him. And Lex says, this is step one. For the time being, JJ and I can make some money together, but make no mistake, my long-term goal is still to be a fourth Horseman.
So isn't basically what he's saying, one of you Horsemen's gonna get it?
It sounds that way, don't it?
He didn't say, I want to be the fifth Horseman.
No.
He wants to be the fourth Horseman.
Yeah.
So somebody's fixing to get strung up.
Uh-huh. Bad times are coming down the pike. Baron von Raschke cut a promo. It was terrible.
It was horrible. He challenged anybody.
He's got an open contract, and he'll face Vladimir Pietrov in the Midnight Express. And then there was like an 8-second pause, and he says, "And you, Paul Jones." Ric Flair and Ole Anderson versus Tim Horner and Eddie Roberts.
So I gotta say this. Flair is in there and he's selling his ass off for Tim Horner. And I actually thought of Conor McGregor. Now, Conor McGregor is undoubtedly the real deal now. But for a long time, no matter what the fans thought of Conor McGregor, the fighters all needed a fight with Conor. Because they thought, this guy's a big talker, he's a big name, he's got a lot of notoriety, but goddamn it, he's an easy guy to beat. That's what the fighters thought. That was a real-life version of Flair's gimmick, where he sold everything for everybody, including geeks. He cheated to win all the time. And so the idea was to make fans furious that he was the champion, and absolutely certain that when he came to their town to face their guy was certainly going to beat this Ric Flair. He's not as good as he thinks he is. That's the whole fucking gimmick. And Conor lived it. He lived Ric Flair in every way.
He did.
The money, the suits, the in-ring gimmick, the whole 9 yards. It's astonishing when you think about it.
Did you see on Twitter today, Ric Flair asked his followers, "What does 'it's lit' mean?" And about 20,000 people said, "It means what you have been doing for the past 40 years. The perfect definition. But yes, Conor's done the same thing. So that said, this match did not need to go as long as
It's
it
been in
did.
the business that long. You need to go on Twitter to ask what that meant. It had to be a gimmick.
Probably. All I know is this match went through a break. It was funny because he'd sell for Horner, but he wouldn't sell a goddamn thing for Eddie Roberts. And they'd give Horner a hot tag, and he'd run in and beat up the world champion. Then he'd tag out, and they'd cut Eddie Roberts off and destroy him. Take him over to the podium, fishhook him into the mic. This went on for a while, and finally Anderson tapped him out with an armbar.
Good match.
Dillon and Luger came out for another promo. Before they could get very far, Barry Windham interrupts.
This fucker. He promised last week.
Yes.
This guy's supposed to be a babyface. Last week he promised, "I'm not going to interrupt any of your segments ever again. But if I see you in the ring as a horseman, I'm going to be on the other side." I thought it was over with. I'm sure Luger did too. This numbskull comes out, and he gets in Luger's face again. JJ starts yelling at him. Barry goes after JJ. Luger waffles the guy from behind.
You've never seen Lex Luger hit a guy so hard.
He starts beating his ass, and then, in my favorite moment of the show, J.J. Dillon jumps in, and he helps Lex Luger put the boots to this guy. And David Crockett is outraged.
Street shoes, he says.
Street shoes. Not that it's a 2-on-1 beating, but J.J. Dillon, the manager, is laying in the boots, and he's wearing his street shoes. Baby faces make the save. Luger saunters off. This angle was awesome.
This was absolutely great. And even, I get your point about Barry gave his word he would not interrupt anymore, and he came in here and interrupted. But you can't blame the guy for this is the first time Luger is actually standing next to Dillon. And Barry just couldn't believe his eyes. He was taken aback and had to say something. So he goes out there and he starts to talk, but then Dillon almost immediately interrupts him. Says, "You know what? I've been on the sidelines, and I can't believe you're wasting Mr. Luger's time." So Barry grabs him by the tie, and then everything else happens. But yes, this was awesome. Ivan Koloff and Vladimir Pietrov got a promo on these superpowers. This led to Vladimir Pietrov versus Zane Smith.
Hideous.
Fucking brutally bad. Painful to watch. Not in a good way. Smith won with a terrible Russian hammer. Superpowers came out for a promo.
You know, Dusty's just been doing nothing for God knows how long. And finally something happened that he can sink his teeth into.
Pretty much, actually, yeah.
And my God, he was on fire.
Nikita goes first and just said something about accomplishing goals. I understand about every fifth word he says. But Dusty, he can't believe that Lex Luger has joined this vile group of horsemen. He promises Lex, "You're going to get the same beating the horsemen are going to get. You have made your choice." And yes, Dusty was awesome. Speaking of awesome people, the Awesome Twosome versus Rocky King and Kent Glover.
They are such an awesome twosome.
It's amazing.
You know what? Rick Rude debuted in wrestling at the very end of 1982. And this show aired just after the very end of 1986.
He was 4 years in.
He was just over 4 years in the business, and he was fucking amazing. You look at Rick Rude, and you think, this guy should work like Luger or Pietrov.
Yeah.
He's just a big bodybuilder-looking guy. Mm-hmm. Like, he should be no good. Because historically, a lot of these big bodybuilder-looking guys were no good.
Yeah.
This fucking guy was so awesome. 4 years into this business. And man, Rude and Raging Bull have the best squash matches. They just ruin these jobbers.
The highlight here, Fernandez goes to whip Glover in for a back elbow. But then he whips him in, but instead of standing in the center and waiting for Glover to come back, he charges full ahead, catches Glover just as he's bouncing off the ropes, hits an elbow right to the mouth. Glover had no idea this was coming, totally off guard, and dropped like a rock. I laughed, and I laughed, and I laughed, and I laughed, and I laughed. Rude hit what appeared to be a shoot pounce, where I think it was Glover, he just lined him up, didn't even hit the ropes. He just backed away, charged, and just blew into him. Just like a train. Just went flying through him. And they hit a double gutbuster, I think, and the DDT for the win. This may be my new favorite team ever. They were not together long.
No, not long enough, that's for sure.
No. Midnight Express versus Vernon Deaton and Darren Stevens.
You know what I really thought during this match? I thought, thank God for the WWE Network. Thank God all of this stuff. It is the best thing ever. I can go up there anytime I want and go back and watch all of these shows. It is a wonder, this WWE Network. Dennis Condrey in there showing everybody how to actually do a brainbuster.
I was going to say, there are two guys in this promotion who use brainbusters as a finish already. Jimmy Garvin and Dick Murdoch. And Garvin hit one 2 or 3 weeks ago. You talked about the best you ever saw, and we've seen a million big, great ones from Murdoch. Dennis Condrey used a brainbuster that put both of those to shame. Wasn't even his finish. He just says, I'm going to show these guys how it's done.
Keep in mind, he didn't know Miz was probably age 0 at the time, but he did a skull-crushing finale, which was better than anyone the Miz has ever done in his life.
Yeah.
Condrey's gimmick is, I'm going to do every move better than everybody else.
Basically. They'll do some great chain wrestling once in a while. I started watching NWA, actually, we're just a few months from when I really started watching. I had seen it time and again, but I was a WWF guy until like the end of 87, maybe a little earlier. But anyway, by the time I started watching, he was gone and Stan Lee was in.
Well, I think he's gone before the Crockett Cup, so
yes.
Any time.
Yes, because Stan Lee was in the Crockett Cup.
Days are numbered.
I think he debuted. I could be wrong on that. But point being, I had seen very little of Dennis Condrey before we went back and started watching these shows. And it's probably just the scaffold match was probably the only thing I saw. And then when he came back the year or two down the line. But anyway, he's awesome. That's the point I'm trying to make. Dennis Condrey's fucking great. Absolutely great. So they get the win. Condrey again goes to drop a knee after the match to see if his opponent is alive. And that was that. Ric Flair came out for a promo.
There's two notable things here. He just wrestled. So he very quickly went backstage, put on all of his very, very expensive clothes.
Yeah.
The funniest part is, I'd forgotten he'd wrestled. I mean, I remembered, but like when he came out with all of his clothes on, I didn't even think about that he'd wrestled. So I'm fixated on his hair. I'm like, what the fuck is up with your hair this week, dude? It looks so weird. Mm-hmm. Like, what's with the bad... And then I realized his hair was drenched with sweat because he'd wrestled. But apparently he'd gone and blow-dried only the top.
Yes.
So the top is all fluffy and voluptuous, and then his mullet is just caked in sweat and totally straight and yellow.
Yes.
So I'm fixated on that. And he's doing his Ric Flair deal. And
it was every Ric Flair promo you ever saw, but it was a great every Ric Flair promo you ever saw.
Yeah. He gives Tony $500 at the end of this.
That's the end. That's the very end. I want to go through this point by point. First of all, he's out there wearing a full-length mink coat after having wrestled. And he immediately removes this because he's sane. But he makes the point of having a mink coat, taking it off, and handing it to someone off camera. Then he's out there and he's talking for a while, and he's still hot. He says, I got to take off this blazer. And he takes off the blazer, pointing out this was $1,800 at Caesar's Palace. Takes that off. He runs down Dusty Rhodes' Boston Celtics t-shirt and cowboy boots. Runs down Dusty, runs down Nikita, runs down Barry Windham. Looks at Tony, looks him up and down, pulls out his wallet, says, I never carry less than $5,000 cash. Counts off 5 $100 bills. Tony, here's $500. Go get a decent jacket. And then he made his plea.
The key to this is, you need to buy a better suit because I refuse to be interviewed by somebody wearing that outfit.
Yeah.
This is the greatest line ever.
Yes. And finally he made his plea. All women, 18 to 28, no husbands, no boyfriends, find the Horsemen at their hotel.
I love that he added no husbands, no boyfriends. Because you know what that means. It's like when you buy the hairdryer and it says, do not use while showering. Someone somewhere put the hairdryer on in the shower.
Flair's not looking for drama.
Some girl showed up at the Horseman Hotel one day, and she brought her husband.
Exactly.
And they were like, now we have to do this fucking disclaimer.
Yes. So, no boyfriends, no husbands. Come to the hotel, find a horseman, and we'll show you a good time, or whatever he said. But, God, this was awesome. So Dylan comes out and is talking about all the people who want to be horsemen when Timothy Horner interrupts.
The look of disgust on the face of J.J. Dillon.
You've never seen anyone look at anyone else with such disdain. So Horner basically says, I am fighting on Barry Windham's behalf, and he charges the ring to wrestle Arn Anderson.
I want you to think about something when you recall this match here. This is the same Barry Windham that we talk about on Tuesdays when we do Retro Raw.
Yeah.
This is the same guy that 10 years later looks like he looks in 1997. I want you to recall that when we did the Battle of the Empire, the same amount of time has passed between now and the Battle of the Empire as between this Barry Windham and the WWF Barry Windham.
Yeah.
And probably we are the same age now that he was when he showed up in WWE.
Close.
That is an astonishing 10-year transformation.
Yes. You know, you see those clickbait ads, what so-and-so looks like now will have you astonished?
Yeah.
With Barry Windham, that's true.
Yes.
So Arn, about 2 minutes in, hits a spine buster, but rather than go for the pin, he's rubbing Horner's face in the mat. Barry Windham hits the ring and attacks. That's a DQ. Arn bails. Windham cuts a promo on the Horseman saying he and his friends are coming, and among his friends he lists Dusty Rhodes, Nikita Koloff, and Magnum TA.
Yeah.
Oops. Jim Cornette comes out to plug the Crockett Cup. This is literally seconds after. And Windham is 10 feet away from him cutting this promo into the camera when Cornette walks up and he says, well, if Windham's got his hands that full with the Horseman, I guess that leaves us to take care of Ronnie Garvin, then doesn't it? So they show the full brawl that opened the show. And the Express had blinded Windham with powder. And then they went to kill Garvin. They didn't hit it, but they set up something that I have never seen before and not seen since. They dragged him over to the apron, so like his head is hanging over the apron. And one of them climbed to the top rope with a chair and held the chair out so the edge is pointing down. They were going to cut off his head.
Well, they're bad guys.
Very bad guys. And Windham made the save with a chair, and they all ran away. So they go back to the studio, and Cornette is vowing they're going to get these U.S. tag titles. They're going to win the Crockett Cup and be the greatest thing in the world. Tully and JJ came out for a promo. Said Brad Armstrong was a great wrestler, but he came up short, which made him a loser and Tully a winner. Tully says, I'm confident that I'm the best at my job. I put up $10,000 of my own money. You don't see a garbage man or a ditch digger putting up his money to prove he's the best at his job, do you?
Actually, he mentioned a floor manager.
Floor director.
I don't know why I thought that was so funny.
He's just pointing at people like cameramans, floor directors. Dylan says you can run down the Horseman in private because you're jealous, and we know that's going to happen. We expect that. But when you insult us in public, when you put your hands on us in public, you're going to get a beating, and that's what Barry Windham got. And all the Horsemen came out, and Arn goes in the spiel about how Dusty Rhodes with the holes in his jeans and his cowboy boots, he would not be allowed in the places and clubs the Horsemen like to party at. Talked about how great they were. His greatest line was, he says, everyone wakes up every day, and the first thing that goes through their minds is, I wish I was someone else. But when you're a Horseman, you wake up and you're ecstatic to be yourself. And they're wrapping up, and they all put their hands in for the big "Whoa, Horseman!" And there's a pause, and they all look back at Lex. And they say, "Come on in here, Lex." Lex throws his hands. He was waiting for the signal, waiting for the office. And he puts his hand in, and they all, "We're Horsemen," and that was it. So Lex is in the club, it appears.
He's an associate of the Horsemen.